We're on.
Good evening. The time is 6:07 p.m. My name is Betsy Smagel Anderson, and I would like to call to order the Board of Directors meeting for today, Wednesday, May 20th, 2026. To order, we are located here at Ava's headquarters at 1999 Harrison Street, Suite 2300, Oakland, California, 94612 in the Altamont Conference Room. Members of the public wishing to make a comment in the room can step forward at the time comments are called for, or if they are commenting online, can use the raise hand function in Zoom or *9 if you're joining through the telephone. Clerk, can you please take the roll call?
Thank you. Alameda County.
Present.
Albany. Berkeley.
Present.
Dublin. Emeryville. Emeryville. We'll come back to Emeryville. Fremont.
Present.
Hayward.
Present.
Lathrop. Livermore.
Present.
Newark. Oakland. Pleasanton.
Present.
San Joaquin County. Stockton.
Present.
Tracy.
Present.
Union City.
Present.
Community Advisory Committee. Community Advisory Committee.
Present.
Thank you. San Leandro and Piedmont.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Emeryville's present.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I have recorded.
Thank you.
And Albany is also present.
Albany. Okay. Thank you.
And
Newark.
Newark.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening to talk about our very meaty informational agenda items this evening. We are going to go ahead now and move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me if you are able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we are moving on to item number 3, which is public comment. Public comment is reserved for members of the public wishing to provide a comment on non-agendized items. Members of the public will have 2 minutes to give their comment. Clerk, are there members of the public wishing to make a comment at this time?
Yes, we have one member with hand raised, Gerard Manning, recognized for 2 minutes.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for your amazing work at bringing clean energy to the East Bay. I'm speaking on behalf of my daughter, Tara Manning. She's a Berkeley resident, but she's at work right now. Moving from gas to electric heating is an important part of Ava's mission to drive increasing access to clean energy. And the Air District's proposed clean air standards are a huge step in that direction, eliminating polluting gas water heaters over the next 15 years and replacing them with more efficient heat pumps that have a longer lifespan and a lower cost of operation. But heat pumps cost quite a bit more to install, which is a challenge for many homeowners. This has led to some on the Air District Board recently to call to reverse or delay the new standards. This would not be good. It would continue to expose us to more pollution, more climate warming, and just kick the can down the road. Several other CCAs and munis are now offering a really elegant solution. Interest-free loans for water heater electrification, paid back simply by a monthly bill charge, which itself is substantially offset by the savings of having a more efficient water heater. We're asking you, myself and Tara, to engage urgently and deeply with SVCE, PCE, San Jose, and the other CCAs to explore creating such a program at Ava for your customers. It's a real win-win. The financial clout of the CCAs and simplicity of on-bill financing make it vastly more efficient and simple than having thousands of individual homeowners trying to get financing from their own banks. You know how hard banks are. It won't come for free, but I think it's the very best way that you can serve your customers to ease their financial burden, let them breathe cleaner air, and give their children a better planet to live in. Please act quickly this week if you can. The Air District votes in October on whether to proceed with these clean air standards, and it may make all the difference if they know that you and the other CCAs will support your customers in this transition. Thank you very much. Good day.
Thank you so much, and thank your daughter as well. Are there any other public comments at this time for our public forum?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, and I'm just checking at our remote locations throughout this meeting. If there are any comments at our remote locations, please use the raise hand feature. I'm going to actually ask our CEO if he would respond to the public comment that was just made.
Sure, happy to. I know this topic is an active topic amongst various constituents, specifically at the Air District, given their upcoming regulations. And maybe I'll just reassure our board, as well as the public commenter, that we are very actively engaged with a broad working group of CCAs, as well as the Air District itself, on those regulations and various programs that help facilitate sort of a smoother transition, looking specifically at income qualified customers, but also non-income qualified customers, and ways to facilitate heat pump water heaters and then transitioning to heat pump HVAC as well. And that's in the form of financing solutions, incentives, contractor incentives, things of that nature. At this stage, not ready to commit to one specific program just yet, but we are actively engaged or evaluating all of those programs in light of their district regulations, as well as part of our customer programs roadmap, which we're trying to do for longer term strategic planning purposes.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and close the public comment, and we're going to move on to our consent agenda. We have 2 items on consent this evening, and I want to flag that the minutes from April 15th have been corrected since they were posted.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the clerk to see if we want to look at the correction that has been made. So we all have a
Absolutely.
chance to see
Let
it.
me, yes, thank you, Chair. Let me go ahead and share them. So Director Traeger explained to me that I had explained the procurement policy motion too briefly. And so I've gone ahead and re-added back. Let me see if I can find it. That Member Traeger had accepted friendly amendments before it moved to the substitute motion. In my prior version, I just stated that Member Traeger motioned to approve the recommendation and Member Jordan seconded the motion. And then I, in an attempt to be brief, just went to describe the substitute motion with all of the friendly amendments. I've gone back and added back, though, that Member Traeger accepted the 2 friendly amendments. There's also a typo. Member Marquez voted no on, hold on one second. On item 6.
Okay, so
Yes.
so what's before us this evening on consent
Yes, right
is the minutes as amended as item number 4. And item number 5 is contracts entered into, which is an informational item. I'm looking at my colleagues to see if anyone would like to pull an item from consent, and or does anyone have a comment about any item on consent? I'm looking, I don't see any. Okay, let's ask for public comment.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, closing public comment and looking for a motion on our consent items 4 and 5.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Director Traeger, and seconded by Director Roche. And let's go ahead and vote.
Thank you. Berkeley,
Aye.
Hayward,
Aye.
Alameda County,
Aye.
Yep.
Albany, Dublin, Emeryville,
Aye.
Fremont,
Aye.
Hayward.
Aye. I already said aye.
Oh, thank you.
Aye
Sorry.
again.
Lathrop, Livermore,
Oh, no.
Newark,
Yes.
Oakland, Pleasanton,
Aye.
San Joaquin County, Stockton,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Union City,
Aye.
San Leandro, and Piedmont.
Aye.
Consent calendar is approved.
Great. Okay, we are now moving on to our regular agenda. Item number 6, our CEO report.
Great. Adrian, if you can pull that up, jump into things. Starting with just a brief summary of our recent subcommittee meetings. We did attempt to hold an executive committee meeting on Wednesday, May 6th. We lost quorum in the middle of that, so we did review the initial draft budget on a purely informational basis. Our next regular XCOM meeting will be on June 3rd at 3 p.m. Next item, just a really brief summary of the recent CalCCA annual conference. This was the 10-year anniversary of CalCCA forming. CalCCA is our trade association, represents 25 CCAs throughout the state of California, which collectively serve over 15 million people. Really excited by hitting this milestone. We had that conference last week, May 12th through the 14th in Sacramento, and it was the largest CalCCA conference to date. A number of our board members were able to attend. We brought 10 board members there, so really appreciative and excited by the engagement from our board members to help collaborate with other CCAs, meet and discuss issues with our own staff members, as well as meeting with some of our external partners, legislators, and other policymakers. So thought it was a great event. Just wanted to highlight and uplift some of the activities from CalCCA, and note that, through the power of this sort of movement that was enacted through legislation passed nearly 25 years ago, we've now signed over 21 gigawatts of new renewable energy generation. So that is just one reflection of the impact that we're having throughout the state of California, in addition to all the local development and jobs that CCAs are helping to enable as well. So thank you to our board members, and of course, thank you to our staff that attended that, and just a huge congratulations to CalCCA for hitting that milestone. Next item is just a highlight of our San Joaquin County launch. We have reviewed sort of updates on that process over the last several board meetings. That is, of course, a major sort of operational event for us. This month, throughout the month of May, we actually began enrolling customers. So based off of their billing cycles, that's when they initiate service with Ava Community Energy. That process has gone smoothly, and just really excited that now we are actively serving unincorporated San Joaquin County. And as of May 11th, I will note our participation rate is about 92%. That is, we continue to track that very closely, of course, to understand what customers are electing to opt out and any reasons that they have, so we can try to actively engage with them. And I'll note that starting in June, we will start to also enroll solar customers throughout the year to sort of align with their true updates, which occur throughout the calendar year. You can see on the next slide, we do have just some sample of some of the mailers and communications that we put out there to continue to ensure that our customers in San Joaquin County know who we are, know what CCAs do, and some of the benefits that we bring. So just showing that as a quick snippet. And I think that's it for this particular item. So you can keep on scrolling there, Adrian. We also have media that was created on that topic as well. The next topic I'll hit on is Ava in DC. We talk a lot about California, of course. We talk about our state legislative process. We don't talk about federal process that often. And so I just want to highlight a recent trip that a number of our policy team members had attended a meeting in DC with a number of CCAs within California, but also outside of California. So there were 22 participants that represented 14 different CCAs, and that was across California, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, and Ohio. So the CCA model in different states certainly has variation. California is perhaps one of the sort of strongest states in terms of the amount of load and customers that are served by CCAs, but it is absolutely an interest area for a variety of other states as well. And so just a great opportunity for us to engage with some of our federal elected officials and continue to educate them on who CCAs are and the benefits of some aspect of local control, and some of the affordability and decarbonization benefits that we bring to that. I'll go to the next topic. We have continued to provide on a quarterly basis updates on the variety of local development activities that we have. We've found this to be useful. I think we've gotten feedback from the board, just given the number and volume of programs and services that we are offering, and how those are progressing. We'll continue to do that. So this is our latest update. We provide it in table format. There's a good 20 line items here on the variety of programs that we're offering. I'm not going to walk through all of that, but I just want to continue to highlight that. That is there as a resource, as a reference guide for our board members to continue to track things. And we will selectively, on an ad hoc basis, bring some of those items forward to our board, either as informational updates or potentially as action items. There are some programs that are nearing the sort of end of the planned life of that program. And so, I would anticipate some items going in front of the board on topics such as AVA Smart Home Charging or AVA Bike Electric for consideration of additional funding and continue the program, or at least to present some of the lessons learned and things of that nature. Breakdown of that is on our transportation electrification, building electrification, some of the resilience work that we're doing. One item that I will highlight there on resilience that's a little higher in the table, Adrian, on critical municipal facilities. Of course, that's a program that we've talked about in the past at length, and just want to highlight that we are nearing completion on a number of those projects here over the course of the next month. Knock on wood, but the 7 NEM2 projects are on track to be completed. So I'm really excited that we've been able to keep to a very tight time frame there and maintain some of the value there for our city customers. And then in the next section, if you want to scroll further, Adrian, we do have a section on the variety of, you can go up a little bit more, just the last portion of that table is on some of the community grants that we have that are active right now across EV charging, youth training, our smaller local sponsorship grants, and then our community resilience hubs. So there's an update that's shared there as well. You can scroll a little further, and this is just the last update that we always give, which is a table of the variety of events that we are. And this is a longer table than the last few months because we are hitting the summer season, and that is a very active period for us. So certainly not going to name all of these events, but really, a great list of events throughout our territory. Excited to obviously engage and continue to educate our customers on who AVA is and our variety of programs and services. And then lastly, Adrian, if you can scroll the final page, this is the most recent list of community sponsorship recipients that we have awarded. Again, the list is fairly long, so I'm not going to read through that, but great organizations throughout our territory. Really excited to be able to provide some sponsorship dollars to facilitate some of their priorities and initiatives. And that is it in the CEO report.
Great. Thank you for that thorough report. Do we have any questions from our directors? Yes, Director Risch.
Just a quick one. Thanks. I just wanted to correct just for the record that the Hayward Juneteenth event, and thank you, I'm glad Hayward is sponsoring that one, is actually going to be held at Mount Eden High School in Hayward this year, not Heritage Plaza. So if the record can get straightened on that, that'd be great.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other, I'm looking at our folks attending remotely. I don't see any hands raised. Okay. Do we have it? Oh, yes. Director Trego.
Thank you. Also, I think this is a quick one. I just had a question on the Solar App heat pump water heater. Understand the reason for the cancellation. Just was wondering if we previously had a contract with Solar App or the Solar App Foundation for Solar App plus PV plus storage.
We did, yes. This is specific to the heat pump water heating aspects when we wanted to expand their functionality towards theirs. So that's what that is referencing, but we did previously have that. And I will just note that we are still trying to find ways to work in this general area, even though this contract was canceled. Yeah.
Okay. Any public comment on this agenda item?
Yes. Bradley Cleveland, recognized for 2 minutes.
Bradley Cleveland. I'm an Oakland resident, longtime Oakland resident and consultant with IBEW Local 595. I wanted to comment on one item in the CEO report regarding the AVA charge, the DCFC public charging stations. We ask that for all future AVA charge projects, and that includes the 4 that are shovel ready and 8 that are in the pipeline. We ask that all those be covered by the current procurement policy that sets workforce standards, including local and targeted hire and use of apprentices, that you apply that policy to those projects as they move forward. I don't believe that policy was in place when the original solicitation was released, but since it has been adopted, AVA has applied it to the most recent community solar RFO for the disadvantaged community solar projects. I also want to highlight that there was a successful collaboration between AVA and an IBEW signatory contractor on the critical municipal facilities projects, which look like they're on track to be successfully commissioned to meet the NEM2 deadlines, which are fast approaching. Thank you, and I appreciate the time.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other public comment at this time?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'm closing public comment, bringing it back for any comments, final comments from members in the room. I think I would just say some thank yous. I was so proud to be at the Cal CCA conference with so many of my colleagues, and I just want to appreciate all of the time you took to attend the conference. I really want to thank Megan Smith, who here at AVA, who organized the event so well for all of us in terms of hotel and all the logistics, and was an excellent communicator. And I also want to just highlight one of the things that made me super proud as a board member of AVA is how active our staff were at this conference. We had 4 staff members on really impressive panels speaking to, the groups of hundreds of people in this CCA sector. And that includes our CEO, Howard Chang, Marie Fontenot, Dan Bertoldi, and Dominic Faria. And I just want to call those folks out because I know it takes a lot of time and effort, but they made us all very proud. So thank you.
Chair.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
Dr. Marquez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our colleagues that attended the conference. It's always nice when you could continue to learn and grow. So just appreciate everyone for making that possible, and just really impressed with this report, especially seeing the community engagement and the spread of the grants and the updates, and just congratulations on all the work being done in San Joaquin County. Just to follow up on the comment made by the public commenter with respect to workforce agreements, I would like to see that added, just because I'm hearing a lot of pressure, especially with industry changes, layoffs. There's just a lot of pressure in our community right now. So I think the more that we could highlight and elevate how this has multiple benefits, not just clean energy, but being able to support our local community members with workforce development, apprenticeship opportunities. That's something we continue to also work on the county level. And so I would like to see if there's a way we could incorporate that with future updates as well. Thank you.
Okay, did you want to respond to any of the comments before we move on?
Nope.
Nope, okay, great. We are now closing out that agenda item and moving on to agenda item number 7, which is the CAC report. Hi, yes, welcome.
Thank you. CAC met on Monday, and we were given a very intense and comprehensive class in what the CAC is, what AVA Community Energy is, the difference between a IOU, investor-owned utility, and a community choice aggregator was, what our jobs were, how to follow the rules. It was long and very extensive. Thank you very much, staff. Alex was there, JP, Adrian, Annie, Kelly, just wonderful staff, and we so appreciated it. That said, I was the only one that was left from the old CCA, the Community Advisory Committee there that day. A couple others couldn't make it. So it was all beautiful new faces and great energy in the room, wonderful choices by the board, missing a few faces, but overall, it's a very exciting new beginning. And one of the things that I hope the Community Advisory Committee does is that each individual member of the advisory committee connect with their respective board members. And this would hopefully be not so much another burden on your time, but hopefully to help reduce the burden, also to be a conduit from the community to the board and Ava, and also from Ava and the board to the community to help build that rapport, the message, and be a translator for some technical, sometimes challenging messages. One of the things that we missed a little bit was there was no time really to go through the usual advisory board program, which would be to look at the budget and or other projects. We missed a little on that, but there was only so much time. And lastly, it was very fortunate to have an old member there, Cynthia Landry, which the Community Advisory Board gave her a little gift of appreciation for her many years of service. And that's it.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions for Chair Souza? Okay, seeing none. Any public comment on this agenda item?
There's no hands raised at this time.
Okay, bringing it back to this body, do we have any comments? I would just thank the chair and appreciate all the good work that you're doing. And I know it'll take a little while for the new members to come up to speed, but I am confident that we have selected some really bright and motivated individuals, and I'm eager to hear the perspectives that they share.
I don't think motivation is going to be the problem.
Great, thank you. Okay, closing out agenda item number 7, moving on to agenda item number 8. This is the first of 3 informational items that we have this evening. This is on our integrated resource planning IRP process overview. And my understanding is Marie Fontenot is going to be making this presentation.
I am actually joined by my colleague, John Newton, who is there in person and standing next to you at the microphone. And John is going to kick things off for us.
Wonderful, thank you.
Good evening, board members. My name is John Newton. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs here at AVA with the Public Policy team. As Marie just noted, we will be presenting this agenda item together. If you go to the next slide, please. As you see, this is the agenda for this topic. I am going to speak to the regulatory context for AVA's Integrated Resource Plan. That's the timeline as well as the submission and input requirements. Marie will speak to AVA's analysis. That's the model assumptions and preliminary results. If you could go to the next slide, please. California's integrated resource planning process is a key part of statewide long-term resource and infrastructure planning. State law mandates that load-serving entities like AVA participate in the CPUC's Integrated Resource Planning Program. Some of the main objectives of the Commission's Integrated Resource Planning Program are to ensure participating LSEs, like AVA, have a plan to reliably meet forecasted customer energy demand with a resource portfolio that has GHG emissions at or below electric industry targets. The CPUC aggregates individual load-serving entity or LSE plans. I'm exercising all of these new acronyms that we all learned on Monday. That individual LSE plans are aggregated and then are converted into a preferred system plan or PSP that satisfies these and other objectives. After aggregating individual plans and performing a capacity expansion modeling analysis, the CPUC may determine that additional resources are necessary to achieve statewide program objectives for the IRP program. As we will next describe, AVA is obligated both to satisfy specific CPUC requirements and to use CPUC specified information in developing AVA's IRP LSE plan. As noted on the slide, this is also an opportunity for AVA to express our procurement preferences. Next slide, please. Here is the current CPUC proceeding schedule and timeline. The current proceeding is where we LSEs submit our LSE plans, and where the commission in that proceeding or rulemaking then develops the preferred system plan. Now, some of the key dates here are August 10, 2026. This is the current deadline for LSEs that are within the jurisdiction of this version of IRP to submit our LSE plans to the CPUC. And then over the course of the following months, the CPUC analyzes the individual plans, aggregates them together, and then considers what other potential changes might be necessary after considering individual LSE preferences to arrive at this preferred system plan, or PSP. I will note that a significant part of this timeline is constrained or meant to facilitate the interrelationship of the CPUC's IRP program with several other regulatory processes, as well as the independent system operators transmission planning process. So this timeline works within a much larger system.
John, can I just confirm that the January 16th, 2025 date, is that an error and it's 2026? That was raised by a board member.
Oh, sure. So there are the initial proceeding, this rulemaking was opened effectively in the October timeframe, but the initial filing requirements were established in this ruling by the ALJ in that proceeding. Several later rulings and publications of the inputs and assumptions, the filing requirements were released over several more weeks. In fact, some of the filing requirements were released in March.
Just to clarify, that they were preliminarily released January 16th, and the outstanding requirements were released in March.
I'm referring to the 2025 versus 2026 year.
Yeah,
Oh,
2026.
Yes,
correct.
that's right.
2026.
Sorry. Thanks. Appreciate that. There's a nice bit of glare. But, all right, very good. If we could go to the next slide, please. All right, so the CPUC's IRP process recurs typically on a 2-year cycle, although it has not always occurred at that frequency at the discretion of the CPUC. A compliant, satisfactory load-serving entity IRP LSE plan must include at least these three things. Well, these three things. In the order on the slide, the resource data template. This is an Excel workbook that contains information about the load-serving entity's existing portfolio of resources, as well as planned resources from candidate resources that are dictated by the CPUC's process. So we're only able to select future resources from the set few that are in the CPUC's basically catalog of new resources. They're not specific power plants anywhere. They're regional. They're generic attributes of particular technology types. It's meant to be representative, but you can't find any one of them on a map per se. Also, a clean system power calculator workbook. This is again a CPUC provided workbook that evaluates the forecasted emissions of the portfolio of resources that are in the resource data template, a combination of existing resources and the candidate resources that the PUC has specified. It's again an estimation of the portfolio as is available within the kind of closed universe of the IRP. And then also a narrative template. This is something that is provided by the CPUC. We are required to use that template. We're required to use, as we'll see in the next slide, we're required to use the structure of that template and provide the information requested or directed in that content. The last note here is meant to acknowledge that AVA has incorporated or internalized, brought in-house a substantial amount of, well, in fact, all of the modeling analysis to produce a capacity expansion IRP analysis. We translate the results of our own internal analysis into a format that is suitable for the IRP LSC plan submission. If we could turn to the next slide, thanks. So this is a little bit more on the requirements of these particular documents. So here, this illustrates the kinds of things that these three core parts of the IRP submission contain. Links that are, I believe, live and accessible for folks on the web, or public materials that are on our website, go to the public versions of this from our other parts of the website, our past submissions. And let's see here, what else do I want to say about this? Well, it's, I think, important to note that I'll stress it again, the CSP calculator is a PUC established emissions evaluation of the portfolio of candidate resources. It does not reflect necessarily our portfolio emissions. And I will note on the next slide, if we could go to it, some of the required inputs and assumptions that we use in developing the plan. This first bullet is one of the core functions that is very prescribed by this process. Many of the others are as well. The load forecast and the GHG benchmarks for each LSE. I just wanted to focus on that for a moment. So the load forecast that is used in the integrated resource planning process at the Commission uses material from the California Energy Commission's Integrated Energy Policy Report, Energy Demand Forecast. The relationship of the IRP to other regulatory processes is really illustrated by this. The Energy Commission develops an energy demand forecast that is then used in the integrated resource planning process to design or build portfolios around that energy demand forecast, which then translates into a transmission planning process at the ISO. The GHG benchmarks that are to be used, and again, set by another agency, the California Air Resources Board, for the electric sector, are 30 million metric tons by 2030 for all LSEs participating in this PUC IRP process. And it progresses down to 8.68 million metric tons by 2045. Our share of that is proportional to our load for LSEs in California. I think that I'm getting one of the desired results from this presentation. Many of these requirements are dictated and prescribed by the CPUC. There's not a lot of real choice in kind of how we have to prepare this. And you see a variety of other required inputs and sort of the parameters of what we can use to analyze our potential portfolio for the program. With that, we'll turn it over to Marie on the next slide.
Thanks, John. John hit the nail on the head. There are two goals of this presentation. One is to familiarize the board with the very stringent requirements of this compliance effort, both the analysis and then the filing. I sort of joked, but there's truth in jest. I've joked to the board in the past that if AVA were just trying to convey the results of this analysis to you, we would not do it in the format that is prescribed by the CPUC. None of these documents are user-friendly. Even the narrative template, it's not the order that I would convey this information in, but we have to follow their narrative template. And as you can see in the agenda, we did include a copy of our 2022 filing, all 337 pages of it. I think that there is one printed copy of that floating around the board meeting room right now. Obviously, we aren't going to print multiple copies of it. So the materials that we will be presenting to the board in the July meeting and asking the board to approve such that we are able to file them and meet the compliance obligation, they are not terribly user-friendly. We recognize that. And so today, what we want to talk about is the other requirement, all of the things that we have to include, the required model assumptions, and then to show you some examples of the output of this analysis, including a version of, the required documents that we will have to file. And then in the coming slides, I'll show you some examples of the analytical results that we'll go through. Before we get to those, John just talked about all of the input assumptions that we are required to include. There are a few things that we can choose to include if we want to. And so here are a few of them. We have not nailed down all of the input assumptions that we will be using just yet. We're making some tweaks and adjustments right now. But notably, if we wanted to, we could have a limit, the maximum annual build capacity limit. And what that means is how many megawatts of nameplate capacity from new resources do we want to add to our portfolio in a year? In some of the results that I'll be showing you in a moment, we included a 500 megawatt limit. The idea would be that we are not adding more than 500 megawatts of new generation or storage resources to our portfolio in an individual year. That could make sense, in terms of thinking about our operational ability to bring on new resources. It's time consuming to bring on new resources. On the other hand, it doesn't necessarily make sense. We're a large load serving entity at this point. We could do one contract for 500 megawatts. We don't have to do 5 100 megawatt contracts or 10 50 megawatt contracts. So assumptions around how time consuming and burdensome it would be to bring on that volume of nameplate capacity have to be sort of questioned. So while we initially modeled assuming a 500 megawatt new build limit in an individual year, that is likely not going to be included in our compliance analysis, or excuse me, our compliance filing. The maximum market purchase, how many megawatts of generation do we want to allow AVA to buy from the energy market in an individual hour? Our peak load is currently around 2,000 megawatts. So assuming that we are capping that at capping how much we can buy from the market in an individual hour at 1,000, that's a pretty generous estimate. In reality, our position is much more hedged. We are more covered than this. We have more than a 70% cover. But you'll see in the coming slides that over the analysis period, our annual peak demand is forecasted to grow to around 3,000 megawatts. And so a 1,000 megawatt purchase limit would be only a third of that. This maximum market sale in an individual hour, the same volume, we will not be including that in our compliance analysis. If the model finds that the most effective way to meet our portfolio needs is to bring on, for example, all solar and storage, we would definitely have more than 1,000 megawatts of energy above our demand that we would be selling, liquidating in the market in an individual hour. So we're going to get rid of that constraint. The maximum out-of-state wind constraint, suggesting that we would only contract, or forcing the model to only allow us to contract 200 megawatts of out-of-state wind in the early years and no more than 800 megawatts across all years. We're going to eliminate that constraint. We don't necessarily want out-of-state wind, and we're going to make some adjustments that functionally lower the value of out-of-state wind. There's a lot of detail around this, but based on our current portfolio composition, AVA, as far as we know right now, it would be hard for us to get full value from an out-of-state wind resource. There's not really room for out-of-state wind to count for RA value, resource adequacy value in our portfolio right now. So we're going to kind of devalue out-of-state wind. We're not going to cap how much we can have. We're going to adjust how much it could be worth in our portfolio. We think that that's a better way to look at, is there room for this resource in our portfolio rather than putting, forcing a cap on how much we can have. So looking at this in terms of what is the value, not in terms of forcing a limitation on it. The PCIA hedge, I know this board is very familiar with the power charge indifference adjustment. and has some familiarity with the fact that AVA models the PCIA that AVA's customers pay. We model that and we incorporate it into our positions as a financial hedge. And so we are trying to represent that the value of that in our modeling effort. And then a minimum annual build capacity. This is the opposite of maximum. We're not having any, in the preliminary results, we did not assume any required new contracting in an individual year, and we likely will not do that going forward. Next slide, please. John mentioned that we are required to use a specific demand forecast published by the California Energy Commission. This is that demand forecast. As you can see, the California Energy Commission is forecast, well, this particular forecast estimated that AVA's demand in the current calendar year, 2026, would be close to 9 terawatt hours this year. In reality, it's coming in lower than this. And so there's a pretty good chance that the entire demand forecast is a bit inflated, but this is what we are required to include. Next slide, please. In this table, the two columns that are most important to look at are the annual peak demand in megawatts and the reliability demand in megawatts. The annual peak demand is a forecast of what AVA's peak demand will be in each of these years. Our instantaneous peak, the reliability demand is, you can sort of think of that as how much of our peak demand is going to drive a reliability requirement from the Public Utilities Commission. We're still digging into these numbers a little bit. The fact that in 2026, the annual peak demand is forecasted to be 1,900 megawatts, and the reliability obligation is close to 2,400 megawatts. And then by 2045, it flips where the annual peak demand is forecasted to be 3,500 megawatts and the reliability demand forecast is lower. That flipping is kind of a strange thing. So we're still looking into what is causing that change and making sure that what we're being told to model is right. So please don't be surprised if in the future I come back to you with different numbers. But at this time, our understanding is that the CPUC wants us to assume we have to contribute about 2,900 megawatts of reliability resources to the grid by 2045. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about some of the preliminary results. And again, the purpose of this is to show you some of the types of images that we will be bringing to you in July and asking your approval of as a part of our compliance filing with the Public Utilities Commission. The values in these images are not representative of what we will actually be filing with the Commission in July. For example, that 500 megawatt annual constraint on new build resources. That is what we initially modeled when we were working on trying to make sure that we were doing the modeling correctly and that it was going to work properly for us. We don't think that that is the right thing to include in our compliance analysis, though. So you'll see that here. You won't see it again after today. And I have this quote, "A model is only as good as its assumptions." If your demand forecast is wrong and you're trying to meet your demand, an incorrect demand forecast, you will put together the wrong portfolio of resources. If you're using prices, resource prices that are not representative of what we actually experience or what we actually see in the market when we go and look to contract for resources, well then, the portfolio we actually build will be different from what is modeled. If the resources that the CPUC thinks are going to be available are not actually available to us when we go to model, that's another reason that the modeling effort will be different from what we actually experience in reality. But it is still a good informational exercise for us. And just noting that we do have a few input assumptions or model constraints that we're still working on. Things like, how much of and do we want to force certain types of resources into our portfolio? Are there resource-specific capacity limitations for each year? That type of thing. Okay, next slide, please. We're going to toggle between this and this is slide 12. We're going to do a little bit of toggling back and forth between slide 12 and slide 13 for a second, so I can demonstrate how model results change based on what the constraints are in the model. So this version, what we're seeing here is how AVA's portfolio could change over time, or how the model suggests that it changes over time from today through roughly 2040. The resources that are in the portfolio today are largely representative of the resources that we have actually contracted and are in the portfolio. And you can see in, I think, 2030, it should be coming online in 2032. It's hard to see in this graph, but there's like a teeny little line at the top. It's teal, and it's supposed to be a geothermal resource. In this version of model results, where we have capped only 500 megawatts of new build resources coming online in any year, the model says, okay, Ava, you have one 40 megawatt geothermal resource under contract today. That's it. Don't add any more from now until 2040. Just have that one that you already have under contract. Will you go forward to the next slide, please, Adrian? In this version, we don't have that 500 megawatt capacity limit. You can actually see the teal bar now. That's how you can tell that the model result is significantly different. When we don't have an annual new build capacity constraint, the model says, oh, it actually would be valuable to add more geothermal and to adjust different resource types. There's a lot more in-state wind that's coming into our portfolio. In this version, I think it was less storage. Can we go back a slide, please, to slide 12? Significantly less solar. Interestingly, having the 500 megawatt capacity limitation shrinks the solar, adds geothermal, and it looked like added wind to our portfolio. So this is just like I said, this is a good example of constraints that you force into the model can determine what the outputs are. And there's like in neither of these views are we adding 500 megawatts of geothermal, but having that 500 megawatt constraint of adding any type of resource per year shrunk, effectively eliminated adding geothermal. Let's go forward to slide number 14 now, please. This is the last two slides were showing what AVA's total portfolio would look like over time. This slide is showing new build capacity, incremental resources, so not the things that we already have contracted. And this is a view of what the model would recommend our annual new build capacity be, again, if there was no annual contracting constraint. And so what the model is saying, a couple of things are noteworthy here. First of all, adding 500 megawatts of wind, in-state wind in 26 and 27, that's not going to happen. If we haven't contracted it at this point, it's not coming online this year or next year. That's just, this model result is a little divorced from reality. So we will have a constraint in our compliance analysis to not allow the model to give us new resources in 26 and 27, because it's just not realistic. But it's really interesting that the model sees value in adding geothermal to our portfolio if we can do it in the inner years. And now, again, the model sees that geothermal could be valuable to our portfolio if we can add it in 28 and 29, and if the cost of the geothermal is aligned with the costs that were in the CPUC input assumptions. But this has me curious. We're about to launch a new long-term resource RFO later on this month. And we're doing some outreach to geothermal developers to see if there are any projects that could be coming online in the near term. Maybe it is worth evaluating adding some additional geothermal. It's a very expensive resource. We've only added a small amount to our portfolio to date because it is so expensive, but this makes us curious to do more analysis and think more about the overall value of the resource in our portfolio if we can add it soon. Next slide, please. Now, this and the next slide are showing basically what the hourly mix of resources could look like under two different scenarios. This is the, I think this is the 500 megawatt annual new build limitation, capacity limitation. Adrian, will you go forward to the next slide? And here, if there's no new build capacity constraint. So the types of resources that we see generating on an hourly basis changes significantly. Let's go back up to the previous slide, please. So in slide 15, the negative blue resources are our batteries in our portfolio that are charging. The green that's going below the zero are market sales. I think it's sort of a gray line, maybe dark blue or gray line that's going across represents our demand. And then you see all of the different colors of resource types stacking up to meet our demand or exceed the amount of demand that we have in an individual hour. And so in this view, the model is suggesting that we put together a portfolio of resources, as represented by the bar chart a few slides earlier. But you see, unsurprisingly, the yellow solar is generating in the middle of the day, wind, out-of-state wind versus in-state wind, and how they look in our portfolio, the amount of market purchases that's represented by the light blue bars at the top. Can we go forward to the next slide? And in this view, the colors are different, so I apologize, that does make it a little bit confusing, but you see a very different battery charging shape on the bottom, and you see less market sales here, significantly less market purchases if we put together a portfolio that's comprised of different resources. The orange geothermal is really changing the way that the orange geothermal and the wind are really changing the way that our overall portfolio is forecasted to look in each hour of the day. Next slide, please. Some other things that we're not able to show you today, but you will see representations of when we talk about when we are showing you the actual compliance filing results. We will be able to show you estimated costs and revenues associated with the compliance portfolio. We will be able to show you an estimation of our compliance portfolio's emissions and contribution to statewide emissions. Now, I want to caveat that when we talk about emissions, we're typically talking about the Power Source Disclosure Report and our power content label, the thing that we mail to our customers once a year. The IRP emissions calculation uses different math. So what you are seeing here in the IRP will look very different from what you are accustomed to seeing. The scale is totally different, and it's not the same mathematical calculations. We'll try to do a little bit of comparison between the two, but please just recognize that IRP is looking at forecasted emissions, whereas Power Source Disclosure Report and Power Content Label are looking at realized annual emissions. Our compliance filing will also show you an estimation of annual generation and how the portfolio helps or contributes to our ability to hedge and protect our customers against market volatility. We will see the CAISO market volatility associated with the portfolio, and we'll also see how well the portfolio enables us to meet the state's renewable portfolio standard compliance obligations. And I believe that is the end. Is there one more slide? That's it. The following materials, like I said, are copies of what we have filed in the past as an example of the type of material you will be asked to approve in July.
Okay, Marie, John, thank you so much. I just have three comments right off the bat. One, effectively forecasting for a CCA, given the constraints we've just heard, involves a lot of really complicated math. So that was one of my big takeaways. And another big takeaway is I'm glad we don't have to do this every year. This is really kind of an every other year, every 3-year project, right?
Yep.
Okay, our CEO wanted to make a comment.
I just wanted to say that's a dense and a technical presentation, and we're really just scratching the surface about dense and technical the actual analysis and compliance filing is. So I both want to thank the team for the work that goes into this process, because it is a multi-year process. And we have done a lot of work to bring in some of those modeling capabilities in-house. We have multiple employees that really focus on this. So that's one just highlight I want to make. The other is that we view this largely as a compliance filing. It is very, very structured and rigid in terms of what we need to do to meet that compliance filing. Partially for very good reason, because if you're going to go seek this information from every load serving entity, you have to standardize what the assumptions are. And so we are doing it. We will satisfy that. That is what we have always done. And in addition to that, every year, as we build our own capabilities and have somewhat more time, we do try to do more of our internal analysis to help inform our own decision-making on what resources we should buy. And that guides all the PPAs that we bring forward, and it guides some of our long-term decarbonization goals. So following this, we do seek to bring additional presentations to the board to sort of speak to some of those elements, and we'll talk about some of the assumptions that we use, all of which will probably be wrong because you assume certain prices for resources and things like that, and then you put out an RFP for resources. You will see that the online dates and the prices and the available resources are all different than what you modeled. So I just want to sort of flag the compliance nature of this filing, and then sort of try to dial that into sort of how do we use that, and how do we, what is the practicality of the real world when we go in and procure resources as well.
Yeah, super complicated. Okay, so do any of my really smart colleagues have any questions? Okay, Director Tregu.
I think smart is a relative term after hearing this presentation. Thank you. I have a few questions on slide 4, the preliminary model assumptions. As you put it, some categories may or may not be required to include. Just kind of high level, I understand compliance is maybe the reason this is done, but ultimately, what is the purpose of using the different assumptions beyond compliance, and could telegraphing certain assumptions to other load-serving entities, including investor-owned utilities, could that disadvantage us from, from a PCIA hedge perspective?
John, would you mind if I take that to start, and then feel free to augment? Member Traeger, so the CPUC forces us to use certain assumptions, and I'll explain why by way of sort of a simplified example. When the CPUC started this proceeding back in 2018, they did not mandate any baseline assumptions. And so they saw that one entity thought that I'm making up numbers now. One entity thought that there would be 5 gigawatts of new offshore wind, and another entity thought there would be 0 gigawatts of new offshore wind. And and another entity thought there would be, 1 gigawatt of solar, of in-state wind, and and that they would get it all. They would get to contract all of it. And a different entity thought there would be 500 gigawatts of in-state wind, and that they would get to have all of it. And so the CPUC realized, if we don't standardize some of the assumptions, like how could they pick whose portfolio seemed realistic at all? And were entities planning to or trying to think about contracting for reliability and for cost in a way that made sense within the construct of the state as a whole? So, I'm not going to kick the CPU. I'm not going to criticize the CPUC in their effort to have us standardize. I think that it is a very reasonable approach. Yes, their assumptions are always wrong, but ours will be wrong also. That's sort of the nature of this type of forecasting work. Does it make sense to telegraph what some of our assumptions are? Yes and no, and there will be some things that we probably won't telegraph. Howard just mentioned that we will be coming back to the board in the future after we've done the compliance filing, and we'll talk about supplemental analysis that we've done based on our own internal assumptions. We probably won't share publicly the resource cost assumptions that we included, because they probably will be informed by the recent RFO that we will have launched. So there will be some information that we'll present to the board that will probably be more tied to what we're seeing in the market and the types of resources that we are contracting or think that we want to contract, and information that we think could negatively impact our ability to contract at good prices for good resources. We will not share that publicly. The PCIA hedge, I think it does make sense to model that or represent it in some way in our compliance analysis. It is part of our risk oversight committee approved risk management strategy. And so while it's not a public facing document, it's not a secret, I'll say. John, anything to add?
Yes, just a little bit. And it's to highlight the interrelatedness of this compliance activity and the necessary assumptions that we have to take when preparing the plan as it pertains to some of these other agency processes. So as listed, the reason I wanted to go to slide 7 is that it illustrates some of these particularly. The second bullet, CAISO zonal topology, and then the third bullet, of course, no numbers. Sorry, apologies. I think of numbers and bullets interchangeably. With CAISO study areas, this integrated resource planning process that is very much constrained by the CPUC's programmatic rules feeds directly into the CAISO's transmission planning process. The aggregate plans that all the LSCs will prepare will inform what new transmission capacity will be considered as viable or preferred, along with the transmission plan activity and the infrastructure, the transfer capacity that will become available from the transmission planning process. This will inform the available capacity for interconnecting new electric generating resources. This is an interrelated integrated resource planning process across the state. So what Maria said, what Howard has said is precisely right. This is not necessarily what AVA's portfolio will ever look like, but the kinds of resources that we include in the plan inform the kinds of resource attributes that future transmission development and interconnection capacity will be needed within California, within the CAISO, within the expanded market. So it's very important for indicating what we will need to be able to build in the future, to be able to allow us to actually procure what we really want. That interrelatedness is quite significant.
Thank you. Did that answer the question?
Yes, I have a few others, but I think they have quick answers. Slide 10, just annual peak demand, is that based on the slice of day methodology?
No, that is actually representative of the forecast for our instantaneous peak. In California, we tend to talk about what's your annual demand. Outside of California, no one really talks about what's your annual demand. People think about load serving entities in terms of what's your peak demand. As of today, AVA's all-time system peak is just over a 2,000 megawatt instantaneous peak. So all of AVA's customers were using a little over 2,000 megawatts of electricity at one point in time, one day last year. And so this is what the instantaneous, one moment in time peak demand is forecasted to be in each of these years.
Thank you. And then I didn't catch PLM. I assume that's
Yeah,
planning
that's-
reserve margins.
It's planning
what-
reserve margin. I honestly, I intentionally skipped over it. It's actually not really relevant to
Okay,
the
that's
analysis
fine
that we're
then.
going to do. Yeah.
It's just, yeah, I had a question. What is the difference between these like the three
18, 19, 21, and 23. So the planning reserve margin is established by the Public Utilities Commission, and it is expected to increase in the coming years.
Okay. And then is there kind of a unifying assumption around well, how does the proliferation of data centers in the future impact this assumption?
Load.
Yeah, it is forecasted into the peak demand, and it is forecasted into the annual demand. And so if we went back to slide the one with our annual demand, let's see, slide number, I think it's 9, the one right before this. Yeah. So Ava's forecast demand increasing from 9 terawatt hours per year up to roughly 19. A lot of that is driven by data center demand increasing. It is also driven by electrification, so building electrification and transportation electrification. But and this is like a very high level back of the envelope number. Assume that like half of the demand growth is data center demand.
It incorporates significant electrification data center demand growth.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is on slide 15, the hourly resource results. And I think you were making a distinction between in-state and out-of-state wind. I only saw wind on the in the categories.
Yes, it might not have been represented correctly on these. On the earlier slides, you would slides 14 and the previous, we were differentiating between in-state and out-of-state wind. We might have accidentally lumped them all together in slide 15 and 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Can I just take a minute? I just want to
Yes,
elaborate on
yes,
one point
please.
there around megawatt versus megawatt hour. We normally talk about load here on a megawatt hour basis. We have 8 to 9 terawatt hours of energy that we serve. We do that a lot of times because from a budget perspective, which we're going to talk about next, that is the basis in which you calculate your revenues, right? Rates time your load. On this page, on slide 10 here, when we're talking about peak demand. The reason why that peak demand is oftentimes referenced as one of the most important metrics in the energy industry is because you have to have available capacity to generate that much energy at your peak. And that's what drives how expensive it is to serve your load, because you have to have enough resources to serve that peak. Even if your peak happens once a year, or if it only happens once every 10 years, because you're accounting for a planning reserve margin. And so it has a huge implication on costs for customers, both from a delivery system perspective, as well as from a generation portfolio perspective. And the more that you can smooth out that peak based off of the profile of your generation, either to smooth it out, because historically, if you had dispatchable resources like natural gas, you want that as flat as possible throughout the day, because you just generate it the whole time, and that's the most cost effective. And with intermittent renewable resources, obviously that generation profile is very different. It is a solar profile, or it is a wind profile, which is highly variable. And so you have to start to match your supply to your load, which just increases some of the challenges that you have. And when you add in storage, of course, you can smooth out some of that intermittency and variability through that type of resource. But your best fit, least cost portfolio starts to look pretty different depending on the resources you have and what your load shape actually is. And so peak demand is still a really critical one. And we may see that start to evolve at certain times, because we may have VPPs or things like that to try to adjust your demand, and that has important implications. So I just want to differentiate those two metrics and why they're so important to think about in different ways.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Continuing along with director questions at this time, Director Roche.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Trego kind of asked a question, a similar question I had about data centers, but I just want to, so if this is due in August 2026, is that then the 27, 28? Like, what's the timeline then that report covers?
So if I might,
Mhm.
if the date holds, because the commission has adjusted it several times already, this will be the 2026 IRP LSE plan. And the IRP plans look forward more than a decade.
Oh, I see.
We
Okay, they're just doing it forward.
we use this in the interrelated regulatory processes for basically the next 3 years, 3 or 4 years. This individual LSE plan submitted this summer will inform the CPUC's preferred system plan released next year, which will inform the CAISO's transmission planning process for 27, 28, which will produce a transmission plan in late 28,
I see.
et cetera, et cetera.
I see. So we're just updating our version of it every 2 years so that they can then plan for the large. Okay. And the reason I asked is similar, because I know like in Hayward, we do have a large data center coming online, but it'll probably be like 2029 before it's up and running. And then we have other large, capacity, like, autonomous vehicle companies, that will also be huge. I mean, users, I think, of electricity. And so just wondering I'm kind of curious, like, how do you put that into the model if within our territory, how do you know when, do you know that a big data center is coming in, or do you know that a large user is coming in? I mean, how do you add that into the model? Just out of curiosity.
We are required to use the demand forecast from the California Energy Commission, the planning demand forecast that the CPUC has selected for this analysis. But we have added a new role to AVA and a new staff member, Ariel Romero Cox. She is our director of strategic load. And so she is tasked with developing relationships with planning departments in all of your jurisdictions. And she was at Silicon Valley Power previously. She has deep relationships with a number of data center companies and developers. And so she is trying to work closely with them to find out, the CPUC thinks that you're coming online in 2028. Is it really going to be 28? Might it be a little bit later? And so that work is starting, but it's a lot of relationship development, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of sorting through confidential filings and trying to get contact names so that we can figure out, who is the principal that can give us updated information about when these large loads are actually coming online.
Let me just put a point on that too. It's just for the IRP, we just take what they give us. It's one of those things that are rigidly standardized. But separately, of course, we try to assess the actuality of those things. And we do advocate in the CEC process for load forecasting on the methodology that's used. It's a heavily scrutinized process. A lot of load surveillance will comment. That doesn't seem realistic. That's not fair that I'm getting the allocation. And we provide a lot of input, but that is not part of the IRP any longer. That's now just input that we take.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I know that she is in touch with our city staff on some of the big things we wonder if are also coming. I also just wanted to thank you both. I'm always trying to find layman's terms and everything we do here, and I know this is one of those topics that's very difficult to put in layman's terms. So just appreciate what you delivered today, and I just keep trying to grasp little bits of information every time we hear about this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking around the room, any questions remaining in the room? Okay, I'm turning to my colleagues online. Any questions there? Okay, now we're turning to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wanting to make a comment on this agenda item?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, closing public comment, bringing it back to the room for any director comments. Any comments online, actually? Any director comments online? Okay, director comments on the room. I know the vice chair has a comment.
So I just want to clarify, this is a compliance exercise. First and foremost, it's just compliance.
Correct.
That is correct.
And to some degree, it informs us because we get a chance to noodle around with some modeling, but the purpose isn't to inform our actual purchase plan.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the other, I guess, comment is as we think about what's going to happen in August or July, whenever you come back to us, if our job is to, and I use the air quotes, approve this, because legally we approve it, framing what you present to us in a way that helps us understand that it is good for us to approve what you have presented. In other words, the CPUC requires you do A, B, C, and D. And look, we did A, B, C, and D. Because that's really the information that we need, because otherwise we're just guessing that you did something right. And so that's my ask.
Thank you.
I'll also just say, we do plan to bring this forward to the board in the July XCOM and then the July board meeting. So that will be the process for review.
It might take me 3 times to actually understand it. So that's good. Okay, any other comments at this time? All right, just want to appreciate John and Marie for very detailed work. I think, again, the more we hear these complicated themes and analyses, the more is going to stick. So that's good. Appreciate that. Okay, we are closing out agenda item number 8 and moving on to agenda item number 9, which is our fiscal year 26-27 draft budget review. This is also an informational item. I'm turning it over to Howard Chang, and we'll also hear from Rusty Mills and Jason Bartlett.
Okay. All right. This is a long presentation, just as a preface, and I'm going to walk through it in detail. It's about a little over 30 slides, and I will go into detail. And my hope is that, depending on the follow-ups, in the next board meeting, we can certainly try to be more efficient, and we can put some of those slides into the appendix as is appropriate. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is our standard approach to reviewing the budget. We do this every year in the May-June timeframe. You can see here we kind of listed out the various meeting touch points. So we did review the first draft budget at XCOM on 5/6, even though that ended up being more of just an informational review. We do have planned review at our FAP subcommittee meeting on May 27th, as well as our next XCOM on June 3rd. And then finally, we intend to seek approval for our budget on June 17th, which will allow us to enter the next fiscal year with a known and improved budget. We list out the various categories in there. We'll walk through all of those in detail. The last point that I will just make that is very important is that as of May 15th, last Friday, we received a PG&E era filing, and that made some material adjustments to the budget forecast that was provided at XCOM. So for the small number of folks that were at that meeting, please just know that this budget looks differently. And apologies for the late update and posting on this material, but we did post this on Friday, the agenda and the packet. And then, by the end of the day, PG&E filed this, and after digesting the information, we knew that this was a material adjustment. So we pulled that packet about 24 hours ago as we were making updates to it, and we have reposted that. So if you looked at this 48 hours ago, this looks very different. We have what is printed out is the new version, and what is linked online is the new version. But just know that if you looked at something before, it's not going to look the same. So look at the new stuff now, re-download it as necessary. This reflects that, and I'll touch on a little bit more in detail what changed and what the process was as we go through this presentation. Next slide, please. Always important to start with context of what does this fiscal year look like, because there is such a relation, there's an important relationship year to year as we are a mid-year to mid-year fiscal period. This current fiscal year 25 to 26, which ends June 30th, 26. So we're about a month out or so. So these numbers are quite reliable. They reflect actuals through March, and then projections for April, May, and June. So again, they're fairly done at this stage, though certainly there's always opportunity in the last quarter of the year for some material movements. The big picture here, of course, is left side was the budget approval, and then the right side is actuals. We do not show here the sort of the adjustments that we made mid-year, just to highlight that. So, but the column of actuals is the most important one, and we are reflecting a net position of about $83 million for the year. That is better than we had forecasted, in part because of the variety of adjustments that we made in that December timeframe, adjusting our value proposition, our operating expenditures, local development contributions, et cetera. And then we are seeing significant softening of energy prices. So that number has continued to grow basically over the last 3 years, and it'll indicates some of what we're seeing in the energy prices on future slides, but that's what's softening. That softening energy prices increases that $83 million significantly, which is sort of grown by tens of millions of dollars over the last 6 months. Next slide, please. So that's the backdrop as we look at next fiscal year, which is really the focus of this presentation. So Here is a short summary of it, and we will unpack that as we go along in these slides. So and what we've done is a comparison of our fiscal year 26 budget with our fiscal year 27 budget. It indicates base case here. We do have some additional scenarios that we have shown in this presentation. I think, in terms of the major categories here on revenues, as I noted, we see a softening of energy prices. That's important as we think about the remainder of calendar year 26. And there are some true-up aspects that also impact what 27 looks like as a result of that. We do see sort of relatively stable rates when all things play out. Cost of energy, we do see a lower energy price scenario. So despite our load growing, you can see that the top of that table, the load, we show wholesale load and retail load. And the difference there is because you have line losses basically. So if you just focus on retail load, that's what we charge our customers. It's about 8.4 terawatt hours in 26 and growing to about 9 terawatt hours in 27. And we'll talk a little about load, but that is a reflection of load growth due to adding unincorporated San Joaquin County, of course, as a new member more than anything else, in addition to other factors that impact load, of course. Overhead is always a relatively small portion of what we look at. Obviously, energy costs is the biggest chunk, but we do have a sort of a review of that. Most of that increase is driven by rent. There's a change of accounting treatment in terms of our credit facility fees and some increased software costs at a very high level, but we'll unpack that as well. And then in non-operating activity, we have higher interest income, some lower borrowing interest due to that change in accounting treatment for credit facilities. And I will flag, we don't have incremental contributions to local development funding in this particular budget. And we do have a couple slides that talk about where our fund balance is at for our local development fund overall. Next slide, please. What I want to touch on here is just some of the uncertainty factors that impact this budget overall. I know this is a very text-heavy slide, so let me just review that from my standpoint. So first and foremost is that we did get an updated ERA filing on May 15th. That is a filing that PG&E and all of the IOUs make that set a forecast for what rates and PCIA will be for the following year. So that is a critical filing that is released. We take that, and of course, that helps to set, we indexed our rates to PG&E, as we all know, so that's a critical data point that informs this draft budget. For that reason, of course, that's why we incorporated the last-minute changes here, since it is such a critical factor with our budget forecast. We will continue to see some changes there. There will be another filing in October. There are some elements related to the May ERA filing that we are still trying to validate and ingest, so there will be some updates just in terms of our own modeling and sort of verifying of some numbers. The other one is PCIA tracks 2 and 3 have some uncertainty. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. I talked about load forecast uncertainty briefly. There's a lot there to unpack just in terms of why there's uncertainty there related to weather, related to new communities that we're serving where we do not yet have a long history of serving that load to know exactly how that's shaped. And then there are other sort of more strategic elements longer term around what is data center load, what does electrification look like, and things like that. We also have uncertainty as it relates to our power generation projects. We have new projects that are coming online. We have many gigawatts of new PPAs, and those are all sort of staggered in terms of online dates in the coming year. So it certainly has implications for those projects if they are delayed 3 months or whatnot in terms of our power costs, et cetera. And then, of course, last few bullets are more on energy price volatility, and I'll touch on that in a few slides. In addition to sort of looking at what those prices will translate to in terms of IOU assumed MPP's market price benchmarks and PCIA. And then lastly, of course, we just touch on interest rates in the macroeconomic environment may change. We've made certain assumptions around interest rates, and it's anyone's view on whether we may hit a recessionary environment or at some stage. So with that, next slide, please. So I'm going to touch on a few of those individual bullets and elaborate on them on the next sort of 3 or 4 slides. So the first one is just the May ERA filing. We do not need to read through all of this, but we really want to just provide this for transparency's sake. So our board and our public appreciate, the filing that occurred on May 15th is a very dense, complex filing. You can get access to that filing here. It's a 350-page filing, and it's got about 20 work papers associated with it. About half the numbers are redacted. They're confidential numbers, market sensitive numbers that we don't even have privilege to see. We have a third-party consultant that is under pretty rigorous confidentiality provisions that allow that consultant to see them. And they are highly limited on what they can communicate back to us. And so we work with that consultant to try to unpack errors, to try to advocate for us regulatory proceedings, and to the extent possible, create models or inform us of issues without breaching those confidentiality provisions. So it's a highly, highly scrutinized process. And there are still some uncertainties in terms of what we're reading in that May era filing. Again, it's only been days and we've been working basically around the clock. I want to thank the finance team and our modeling team, basically working through the night to update this presentation. And we do ingest a lot of information in terms of what are the revenue requirements from PG&E. That has a huge impact on what the rates will be and ultimately what our revenues will be. But there are a lot of uncertainties as well, because some assumptions are simply not updated in this filing around like market price benchmarks. So we incorporate our updates on some of those assumptions. And then in our review of the multi-100-page document, of course, you see inconsistencies, you see what maybe errors, you see things that we are interpreting, and we have some limited basis to validate those interpretations. So every day that goes by, we try to ask questions within our own staff, amongst other CCAs, and to the extent possible with our consultant or even directly with PG&E to unpack some of those issues. So my point here is there are still quite a bit of uncertainties in terms of what we've interpreted and taken from the May era filing, but it is a critical filing that we need to fully digest. Next slide, please. The last point I'll just make on that is due to the timing of this, I will just note that although we typically always review our draft budget with XCOM in early May, we should consider, staff is considering in future years perhaps not doing that review because this filing is always set around mid-May. And so we may find that that is not a very useful review, quite frankly, because we know that the numbers can change materially. So just a side note though. Next slide, please. You've seen this slide before. This is kind of the basic mechanics around PCIA. We always like to put this in there because it takes about 1,000 repetitions with PCIA to start to grasp it. The basics on PCIA and why it is so important to us is PG&E has a portfolio of stranded assets. That is their portfolio of costs. Year to year, you do a portfolio valuation based off of where current market prices are at. That differential equals your stranded costs, and your PCIA is intended to make PG&E whole on those stranded costs. It is a highly scrutinized regulatory process in terms of how you calculate portfolio value and therefore how you calculate PCIA. We've touched on some of those elements, and I'll elaborate on that on a further slide as well. What's an important dynamic is really in these last two bullets here. The higher that energy prices are, means higher market price benchmarks, which means higher generation rates and lower PCIA. And that creates more operating financial headroom for AVA. And the opposite of that is true. Lower energy prices, lower MPBs mean lower rates and higher PCI, and that really compresses our headroom. That's what we're experiencing in calendar year 26 right now, and why we've made various adjustments in this fiscal year period. Next slide, please. We love eye charts on these slides, so we'll continue to give you eye charts. What I'll note here is what is happening as it relates to PCIA related proceedings at the CPUC. Track 1 is over and done. That was related to the RA reform, or RA calculation reform that we've covered now over the course of the last year. That's been finalized, it's been approved, it's been incorporated, and it is part of what drives the significant financial headwinds that we are experiencing here in calendar year 2026. There is an appeal process and some potential litigation as it relates to that. I'm not going to touch on that given the confidential nature of that, but that's what's formally occurred in track 1. Track 2 and track 3 are still ongoing or future proceedings. Track 2 is an active proceeding. That is a narrower focus. It's most focused on RPS, or renewable energy certificate pricing. And it is a proceeding that's really talking about how do you value some of the banked RECs that PG&E has. We have taken different positions than the IOUs, as you can imagine. It's an ongoing proceeding. We anticipate that it will wrap up in 2026. for incorporation in 2027 rates. Track 3 is a bigger scope. That is in a pre-scoping process right now. That is, as a result of it being in the pre-scoping process, is uncertain as to what that will really cover, how expansive that will be. But you can imagine we have different views and positions than the IOUs on this. And so there is a wide range of impacts that we may see come out of this proceeding. There are, I believe, 3 different workshops scheduled for the month of June that will continue to scope and determine what that scope looks like, what topics will be covered, and the time frame in which it will be deliberated and finalized. I anticipate that will get pushed into 2027 to get finalized, likely to be incorporated in 2028 rates. So just want to flag that. Next slide, please. This is a slide that we generally show each year. It shows our load growth year to year. And obviously, as we've continued to expand, you can see how that grows. And the colors in the bar chart reflect the different proportions of Bright Choice Residential, BC-Res, Bright Choice CNI, Commercial Industrial, R100 Residential, and R100 CNI. That's the bar chart, and that goes with the left axis, which kind of shows our overall load. As I just noted, we talk about megawatt hours when we're talking about load. That is the most direct implication on our revenues. And the line and the percentages on the right axis are our Bright Choice percentage. So a little bit of variability there year to year based off of how jurisdictions are opting customers up or down, as well as expansion of new territory. So there's a little bit of fluctuation there between 26 and 27, but roughly 1/3 of our load is on R100 and about 2/3 on Bright Choice. And the last thing I'll just note here is that load is highly variable. It can adjust 5 to 10% year to year, and that's putting aside sort of new territory expansion, but that variability is largely driven by things like weather. If it's a hot year in the summer and with record-breaking temperatures, as an example, you will see materially different load and materially different prices. And if it's mild, of course, you'll see the converse of that. And then, of course, individual customer usage, as I noted, expansion, new territories, or perhaps new CNI customers or new data center load or new electrification, all of those things have pretty significant implications on load. So that is one area of uncertainty that we flagged. We obviously make a forecast here, but it is, of course, subject to some change. Next slide, please. Next couple of slides are related to price volatility. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, thanks. So this is specific to Brown Power pricing. This is specifically NP15 pricing in CAISO. So that's Northern California, sort of the most liquid hub pricing that we see. It is the closest proxy to the actual power prices that we pay, which are PG&E DLAP. So those are, you can look at these as comparable. What we're trying to show here is the type of volatility that we've experienced over the last 10 years, which has been historically high volatility. And you can see spikes there, most notably in that sort of 2023 timeframe. If you recall, summer heat waves and record temperatures, and some of the extreme winter temperatures that we also saw nationwide. So those have huge implications on this type of pricing. Natural gas pricing is a huge input to this. System capacity, transmission congestion, all leads to this type of variability and volatility that we see year to year. That is, the blue line is sort of the day ahead pricing. And then the solid black line is the annual average over the year. So you can see how that changes. At the low point, it's sort of in that $35-$40 range. At the high point, it's approaching sort of that $90 range. So it is a pretty wide range, even on a calendar average, and that's not looking at the day ahead volatility itself, which obviously has much more significant variability. That's really important as we look at the next slide. So the last slide I showed you all goes into that top right bar chart. That is Brown Power. When we talk about rates, and more specifically, when we talk about PCIA, these are the 3 most important inputs in determining PCIA, and certainly have very significant impacts on generation rates as well. So when you calculate PCI, you're looking at the portfolio or the market value for RA, for RPS, and for Brown Power. And what the purpose of these bar charts is really to show the variability that we see year to year, as well as to show the variability between a forecast and your final numbers. And as you can see, those bar charts are not evenly lined up. And so it just goes to show you that year to year, as we create our budget forecasts, we will inevitably see these numbers differ greatly from what we forecast in our budget. So we have to just plan for that uncertainty and the risk that is inherent in providing energy, because these are the commodity inputs that we look at. So for Brown Power, you can see that has spiked in the 22 to 24 timeframe. It has started to soften in the 25, 26, and forecasting the 27 timeframe as well. That softening is, of course, is a good thing. We want to see prices lower. Ideally, we would see them stable and soften in a very gradual, with a very gradual trend that allows a load serving entity, of course, to manage our portfolio of costs in a predictable manner and to cost average over time and to gradually lower our customer costs. When you see this type of volatility, unfortunately, the market prices in a risk premium for this type of volatility, and it puts us under more strain in terms of when we should buy, how much we should buy, because we don't know if prices are going up, prices are going down. And you can also, of course, see that the dark blue bar is the forecast, and then the light blue bar is the final. And some years the final number is higher, and some years the final number is lower. So they're always mismatched. And that's important because there's a true up mechanic that happens year to year, right? So when you set your rates, you're looking at your forecast for what your energy prices are likely to be the following year. And you're also truing up the prior year's actuals relative to forecast. So if you over collected or under collected based off of actual prices relative to forecasted prices, you have to account for that in your rate setting process. So if you over collected in one year, your rates next year will go down because you have those over collected funds. And of course, the vice versa is true. If you've under collected, your rates the following year will go up, all else being equal, of course, because you need to recover that funding. All my comments can be applicable to RA pricing as well as RPS pricing. What is unique about the RA market price benchmark, which is in the bottom left quadrant, there is PCI reform, right? So that orange bar, the huge differential between the forecasted price and the orange bar there is both driven off of market prices and the softening of market prices, but more so driven off of reform and a change in the calculation methodology that occurred for that. So that's why you see a huge drop there. And that is a huge driver for why 2026 rates came down so significantly, is because there was an overcollection deemed as a result of that in 2025 that then gets trued up in 2026. You can see in 26 and 27, RA prices tend to be a lot more stable after that. We'll see if that continues to ring true, but that's at least what's forecasted here. And then RPS is the bottom right. That's historically been relatively stable in sort of the teens sort of level. And then you can see in 23 through 26 timeframe, there was significant uptick in that type of pricing. And we are seeing pretty material softening in 26 and 27 there. So those inputs are really critical for setting PCIA and just really indicative of the volatility that we see in the market and what we have to manage, both in terms of our portfolio costs, as well as, of course, our top line, our revenue, which are hugely impacted by these types of inputs. Next slide, please. So how does that all get sort of translated to rates, right? So the bottom left bar chart is calendar year, and the bottom right is fiscal year. And you can see the sort of as a result of the fiscal year, because it blends two different calendar years, it actually is a little bit of more stability there in terms of the levels of bar charts. I'll start with the bottom left. We are in 2026. We are aware that in calendar year 2026, we're running at a deficit as a result of the reduction in rates and the increase in PCIA. So the blue portion there is AVA generation rates. That's really our headroom, what we have in terms of revenue coming in from customers. The kind of pink purple is equates to the PCIA fee. When you add those two up, those are the total generation related costs or charges that our customers face. And then the orange line is the margin there. So you can see that's a negative number for 2026. So that runs at a deficit due to softening of energy prices and PCI reform, which I've highlighted. In 2027, you can see that there's a slight increase there on the AVA generation portion and a slight decrease on the PCIA portion. So we get sort of neutral to our margin. So we become sort of flat there. When you look on the bottom right table, you can see our fiscal year. That rightmost bar chart reflects where we are for the fiscal year period, which blends that 26 and 27 calendar year bar charts there. So kind of smooths out the volatility a little bit. So it's more of a gradual drop. That is one of the benefits of having a mid-year to mid-year fiscal periods. You get to blend some of that out because of this sort of true-up nature that happens year to year. But it also brings some inherent challenges because you are setting your forecast mid-year. So for example, this year right now, there's more uncertainty as to what 2027 rates will be, both because there's a lot of time between now and 27. So how market prices continue to trend and actualize will have a huge impact on 27. And also, of course, we don't have finalized numbers provided by PG&E in terms of the rate setting process. So the downside of this fiscal year process, of course, is we're in a greater uncertain state as to what 2027 rates and revenue really look like. So we're forecasting it, but it's inevitably going to change. Next slide, Adrian. Okay, so now we're going to unpack some of the different categories in the budget table itself. We're going to start with revenues here. What we show is 26 budget, 26 actuals, and then 27 budget. Again, these are all fiscal year periods, so mid-year to mid-year. You can see our revenues in the fiscal year 27 budget are down slightly relative to both budget and actuals at around $810 million. You can see our load, that is despite load growing to some extent due to expansion of San Joaquin County, mostly more than anything else. You can see our uncollectibles is increasing slightly. We have changed that assumption from 1% to 1.25%. It's a small percent, but it is still somewhat meaningful when you look at our overall revenue picture. That is simply us sort of accounting for slightly higher aging than we're seeing historically, and a guess as to whether we may see some recessionary activity in the future. But that's a speculative point to make clear. We don't assume any further adjustments to value proposition, so they're held steady at a 0.5% discount to PG&E for Bright Choice and a 1 3/4 cent premium on R100. The last thing I'll note is there's a GASB 62 line item in that table. What that is related to is in previous years, we've had $10.5 million that was set aside from a prior year budget surplus that was earmarked specifically for incremental clean energy generation capacity. In 2024, we had board approval based off of some additional PPAs that we took forward to the board to authorize. And with that approval, we noted a release of that $10.5 million in 2027, calendar year 2027. And so we have split that release of GASB 62, 50% in the next fiscal year, and then 50% in the year after that. So that's why there's a $5.25 million GASB 62 release that is related to that. And that is generally to cover an additional PPA that we signed years back that was slightly higher than all the other PPAs. And so that these funds were helping to support that effort. I will note, I wouldn't recommend we continue to deploy this type of action in the future. I think it's hard to put that money specifically towards a specific project per se. I think that the concept of it made a lot of sense, but I wouldn't recommend us continue to take these types of actions because the operational aspects of earmarking certain funds for certain projects, especially when energy market prices are so volatile, starts to lose some of its logic and practicality in practice. Next slide, please. So this is a table that shows the various MPBs, market price benchmarks, that are utilized as inputs for our revenue forecast. So each of these ties to those 3 bar charts that we showed earlier. These are the 3 primary energy products that inform PCIA and rates: Brown Power, RPS, and RA. And these numbers are the inputs that we've used. So what's important here is that for 2026, that line item, you can see for Brown Power, it was forecasted at $51. So that was what the assumption was when rates were set going into 2026. And we see that number actually softening quite a bit. That's as I noted earlier, that's one of the reasons why in this fiscal year we actually see better than forecasted results, is because we have softer energy prices. So that's a good thing on a short-term basis, but those are the types of things that will get trued up in the following year because you forecast at a certain level and they're actualizing at a different level. So technically we've over-collected in that particular dynamic. And then you can see what we're forecasting for 2027. You can see the same thing for RPS. It was forecasted at $62. We are assuming that it finalized around $40. Prices are softening quite a bit. I will say our ability to predict RPS is very, very difficult because it is looking at a portfolio of transactions of which we do not have direct access to that. So this is one of the things that we're focusing on for the PCIA transparency bill that we've pushed with from a legislative perspective to get better visibility into the collection of transactions that's used to calculate these prices. We are unfortunately fairly speculative in how we do that and weight that. And then the last category, of course, is RA. You can see that forecast and that final. Those prices tend to be less volatile because you actually purchase it a year ahead for the following year from a compliance perspective. So you're not doing it as real time as some of the other products. The last point I'll make here that is important is that one of the big changes from our draft budget review from our XCOM until now is that we were seeing a significant deficit in our initial draft, about $150 million. Now we're about neutral. That is a huge swing. Part of that is driven by some of the market price benchmark assumptions, which we've updated. Part of that is just simply driven by some inputs from PG&E in the ERA filing itself. Their revenue requirements stay relatively flat despite declining load. And what that means is a higher generation rate. And that's what we've incorporated here. And that's why we've been able to move our deficit forecast to more of a neutral forecast. What will actualize is still highly uncertain. I think there's elements here that I've already touched on where there are some unreconciled numbers. There could be errors. There are open questions we have as to why is the revenue requirement relatively flat when load is actually declining for PG&E. It's not explained. Part of that is because a lot of that is redacted. So we simply don't have access to that information. So we need to continue to unpack that and see what answers we can get over the course of the next month through the formal ERA sort of process and through our consultant. So there's more to unpack there, but I just wanted to flag that level of uncertainty and why that's such a critical input and what drove this pretty material change in our draft budget forecast. Next slide, please. What we have here is clearly the message here is we see a lot of volatility and unpredictability with a lot of elements in our budget. And so as a result of that, we tried to create multiple scenarios to look at some high end and low end scenarios. Now, these are not bookends. Certainly at an extreme, they can be lower and they can be higher. But within reason, we have kind of stress tested some of the assumptions that go into the top line revenue forecast as well as the energy costs. The column to the left is our base case. So those numbers all align to the prior tables that we've reviewed. The low end, you can see, assumes sort of a drop in energy prices. And below that, in that table, you can see what the assumptions are on the various energy products that we've kind of stressed downwards. For simplicity, we just did it with Brown Power and we brought it down one standard deviation. That's very low, but it's not out of possibility, of course. And so that would bring us to about a negative $40 million loss. And on the high end, you can see if power prices were to remain more elevated, we did that for RPS and RA. Those numbers are actually what were filed by PG&E in this ERA filing, the 6245 and the 11.53. Those are assumptions they had. We view those as relatively stale assumptions. They didn't update those market price benchmarks. So we just for this particular scenario, we kept those at an elevated level and looked at what the impact of revenues and costs would be there. You can see the upside there brings our net position to about $27 million. So the impact on the high end is a little bit more muted. That is in part as a result because of the inputs that we stressed. So in this case, we stressed RPS. And our energy costs, we have some indexed energy costs to the market price benchmarks. So when those energy costs go up, it does increase revenues, but it also increases our cost of energy. So there's different dynamics at play for the various energy products. Next slide, please. So that's revenues. I'm going to move now to expenses. So here's an overview of our overall operating expenses broken out to energy operations, overhead operations, and then we'll touch on non-operating expenses. Energy operations account for about close to 94% of our overall operating expenses. We all know that. Largely, our expenses are cost of energy, and then cost of energy services as well. And we'll elaborate on each of these. And then overhead operations, personnel, marketing, legal, professional service, et cetera, that accounts for about 6.5% of our total operating expenses. And then our non-operating expenses are things like our capital expenses, local development fund, and we have a slide on that as well. So we'll go to the next slide. So we'll first go to energy operations. This is a breakdown of cost of energy, which is, of course, the biggest component by far. We are forecasting that about $756 million. As noted, we see a softening of some of those prices. So despite higher load, that number is coming in lower than both budget and actuals for this fiscal year. And then you can see below that is a category of energy services. So our data management, our billing services, our scheduling services. When we say scheduling, we're talking about energy scheduling services. That's what adds up to about $14 million. So that stays very stable year to year. And then, of course, you can see how that adds up to $770 million. The very colorful bar chart to the bottom left is just a breakdown of some of the key energy components there. To be direct, it is intentionally somewhat opaque because that is market sensitive data in terms of what we are actually procuring and what costs. So we're just trying to show the variability and the trends there year to year more than anything else. And there's a lot of dynamics at play there when prices soften, what happens in terms of PPA costs and hedges and open position and things like that. But I think what's important to look at there is the variability year to year. And then the other thing is just sort of the overall weighting. PPAs, hedges, and open tend to be more Brown Power focused. Resource adequacy, of course, is RA. And then you can see RPS, or RECs, I should say. I will note that within PPAs, that is a bundled product PPA for the most part. So our PPAs include both RA aspects and RECs within that. And then the last few are carbon-free, which is large hydro, and then other smaller transactional costs, which tend to be more stable. Next slide. Next slide is on our power content. The table at the top left is one that we've seen many times that sort of shows our schedule for procurement until 2030, which was, of course, an important target and board action that we took years back. We year to year make various adjustments on that up or down. Perhaps the most important related adjustment that I'll flag is in December of 2025, our board did approve a compliance period procurement methodology, and that allows us to manage the variability that we see year to year in some of the procurement levels. The bottom left table there is to show what our annual targets are. That's the left side of that. So you can see renewables, large hydro, and total. Those numbers largely aligned with the table above, though we did make some adjustments for 2026 to bring that down slightly, which is why that says 76.6, where it was previously 81%. The right side of that table shows our actuals or forecast. So 24 is totally done. 25 is mostly done, but surprisingly, we are still getting invoice and reconciling and settling contracts from 2025. So still not totally done, but directionally reliable. And then 26 and 27, of course, are forecasts. And you can see those numbers actually come down a little lower. That is by intention to some extent, because the whole point of having the flexibility of a compliance period allows us to adjust our procurement year to year. In tighter years, we try to procure a little less. And in stronger budget years, we procure a little bit more. And also that is just the reality of if it's a wet year, you get more large hydro, and that's pretty unpredictable going into the year. And so we want the ability to adjust for that and adjust for our sort of our financial and our cost management in light of that. And then the last thing I'll just note is in 2027, it's the last year of a formal compliance period for state RPS levels. And so we've accounted for that to try to procure less in that year because generally you see price increase in that year. Okay, next slide, please. Now we'll start moving into some of the smaller individual line items under our OpEx. This slide is on our personnel costs. You can see a breakdown of that in terms of salary, healthcare and benefits, retirement, and payroll. In the current fiscal year, we had budgeted for 7 additional FTE to get to 105 people. There are 2 roles that we are not intending to fill by the end of the fiscal year. That's in part just scrutinizing the roles that we have and we need, and trying to be very mindful of OpEx in light of some of the adjustments that we made mid-year. For this fiscal year, we are seeking approval to add 5 full-time employees to get us to a total of 108. And you can see the various areas that we intend to hire those folks: contract management, finance management, contracts and settlements, optimization software engineer, and data analyst. You can see a breakdown of our compensation adjustments with COLA, promotions, annual incentive plan compensation. And then I will note there is an increase of healthcare premiums that is accounted for here. And there's also a change in recategorization of some of the benefits from salaries and wages to healthcare and benefits, which is why you see healthcare and benefits sort of increase so materially. Those are the last 2 points are important for that particular line item. Next slide, please. This is a slide that we showed last year for the first time. It is a requirement per AB 2561 to report on our vacancies. So the table to the left shows our total active FTE that are budgeted at 105. New FTE budget are 7. New FTE filled to date are 5. And we have some statistics there in terms of average time to hire, 67 days, vacancy rate of 29%. Our retention rate of 95%, very high, and our average turnover rate, which is the difference there of 5%. I will, as I noted on the prior slide, we are not intending to fill those final 2 positions that are vacant here. The bullets to the right, maybe the only highlights I'll make is it is a challenging environment to hire. This is a pretty specialized area. The number of CCAs, the proximity to PG&E across the street. So we compete a lot for good talent, though we've done a very good job of retaining really good people. And I think what helps us do that is one, just really intentional, robust hiring process and recruitment. And we are a really mission-driven organization. So we really highlight some of those, intangibles, which is so important to our staff and why they're here within our agency. Also, just really proud to note that we are certified Great Place to Work. That's a survey that we've done of our staff over the last several years. We continue to rate very well in terms of what's referred to as our ENPS or Net Promoter Score. Employees are really happy here. We've been able to retain really good people. And so we certainly seek to continue to do that. Next slide, please. I know this is a lot. We've got about 10 slides to go. I'll continue to move quickly. This is marketing and communications. No hugely material changes here, so I'll probably breeze by this. We're trying to invest in a brand awareness strategy. That's one thing I'll note. And the other thing I'll note is that we do have an increase in sponsorships here to $930,000 or smaller level sponsorships as a way to engage more robustly with our community and smaller organizations that we're interacting with. Next slide, please. Our legal expenses do not change materially, pretty in line with our budget, though they are above actuals. We generally are lower on actuals due to 2 things. I would say cost savings, and the other one is we always carry material budget for litigation expenses. We do have active litigation. We have litigation readiness. We have potential disputes. So we will continue to carry pretty meaningful dollars related to litigation-oriented expenses. So that's what's reflected here. Next slide, please. Here we have professional services. There is some growth here. I would say the big highlight here is more technology-oriented increases, more on data engineering, more on our CRM, our customer reporting management system. And so those are the big factors there. some more on IT and cybersecurity. And then the last item, the other services, is the other bump up. That is actually for temporary consultants and contractors. That is a recategorization of what was previously under our personnel sort of budgeting area. Now we put that under other services. And so that number is a move, but it is also an increase as we are seeing people off on paternity leave. If we have any turnover employees, we do need to bring in resources to sort of backfill on a temporary basis. Next slide, please. General administrative is a little bit of hodgepodge of many operational things. We do see some growth there, and I'll call some of those things out. The big one is we did a recategorization under operational expenses that increases that due to a recategorization or accounting change, specifically for fees related to our line of credit. And you will see an offsetting aspect in non-operating expenses. So that's one reason for a pretty material bump here. Nothing too material on some of the other categories. Software and subscriptions is the other area, additional IT related expenses, software needs, and cybersecurity needs. So that's a bump up there. And I would say the third one is rent and utilities. So we finish up a sublease, which was at a lower level, and now we're moving into a full lease. Those are things that were previously approved about 2 years ago, but as we've made that change, that bumps up a little bit. Last year, we also had TI related credits that lowered our rent, and so we've used those credits, and so that's why you see an uptick in rent and utilities. Next slide, please. Non-operating activity here. We are holding rates at 3.5%, which is in line with actuals for interest income. That's higher than budget. In terms of other non-operating expenses, the big one, of course, is local development funding. We had budgeted at about $10 million. We made an adjustment on that mid-year that brought that down by $10 million. For this budget cycle, we do not have any incremental contributions to local development. We do have a couple slides to touch on where our funding balance is currently at and what we have planned in terms of activity. This is not a reflection of us doing less this next year. It's simply that we have a lot of funding that we need to deploy. And in light of a just about neutral budget forecast, we felt that was prudent here as we're in a strategic planning phase as well. Next two slides are local development oriented. This is that fund balance that I noted. We have presented this at various times to do a fund reconciliation, all the different categories that we have funding. Our total right now is nearly $84 million. So we have plenty of funding towards these various programs. A lot of that is earmarked, of course, to specific programs. Some of that is not. And so we will definitely bring that forward to the board at various times for consideration and authorization. But this is just kind of the big picture of what we're looking at in terms of total local development funding. And the next slide, please. You can see here, this is what's anticipated for fiscal year 27 in terms of actual spend on the left side, about $12 million. And then on just to the right of that, we have a column called committed, which is nearly $30 million. We're not going to spend all of that next fiscal year, but we may say award a grant, which is a 3-year grant. And so we consider that to be committed. And of course, those are higher dollars associated with it. Other things I gave a charge, we're signing a contract for something and building that site and it's operational, but of course that funding may be dispersed over a multi-year period, right? So we may have larger dollars in our fund balance, but we need to hold those for these committed expenses. So that's the difference between those two columns. Next slide, please. Here we have deferred revenues and reserve funds. This is a table that we've seen many times. There's no material changes, but we just show how it lines up year to year. Our total reserves are about $330 million. When you compare that to our forecasted operating expenditures, you can see what our percent coverage is. We're about 40% on our reserves. As a reminder, we have a target range of 25 to 75% with a target of 50%. So we're close to there. And then the bottom left tables are rate stabilization fund. We've been trying to build that over the course of the last year or two. And that's at $163 million roughly for rate stabilization fund. And then the clean energy investments, I touched on that before. That was a prior action that board took where we allocated $10.5 million towards those efforts. As noted, half of that will be released this next fiscal year. Okay, next slide is a wrap up. Just in terms of next steps, we are going to review this further with FAP and XCOM, and then we're going to bring this forward for board approval at the June 17th meeting. We're going to continue to ingest and evaluate some of the changes that just occurred. So I do anticipate some changes, but hopefully they're not too material, but we will of course flag those appropriately in our future meetings. I think that's the only highlight really there. And the last slide is an eye chart, but it is trying to just show the whole budget table in sort of totality where we broke it up in the previous presentation. And that is it.
Okay, thank you. That was very detailed, and I do want to remind folks that this is an informational item. We're not making any decisions this evening. This will be coming to the FAP and to XCOM as other opportunities to ask questions and kind of dig into the details. I just want to note the time. It's 8:16. We do have a last agenda item that we would like to get to before the 9 p.m. hour. So with all of that said, if you have burning questions that need to be asked right now, please, I see that, Director Fugazi had her hand up and then it came down.
Well, I would like to I just would like a little insight on the benefits real quick. I know you said, it's the medical and benefits piece, but I'm sure everybody here, their cities are seeing their health benefits go up. And I just wanted to know what the ratio was.
I will probably need to follow up with you on the more detailed quantified number there. The increase in healthcare and benefits is two things. One is a recategorization of certain benefits that we already had. And then the other bump up is due to healthcare specific bumps. Last year, we saw a more modest bump. And what we heard from the industry, other CCAs, they saw a much more significant sort of double digit bump. And so we're just planning accordingly. We hope we can keep that small, but it is a pretty meaningful number. I'd have to get you the exact number, but it's probably order of magnitude getting to that 7-figure level when you think about 100 plus people.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, I know the vice chair has some questions.
Two questions. The first one, the 24 million in interest at 3.5% ties back to maybe 600 something million. I'm trying to just put that together into my head, like what's the 600 and something million of assets on which we're earning?
We have reserves, we have cash. I'm going to phone my friend Rusty if there's any more color he really wants to talk about in terms of our treasury management
Because it's
there.
like 330 in reserves.
Yeah, we have 330 in reserves. We have 162 in the rate stabilization fund. We have various working capital, some of which does not earn interest. So we do carry higher balances, I think, than that 600 as you're doing the math there. But we do have some of it in liquid, uninvested vehicles, just like a checking account.
So I'm just looking for always trying to get common sense sort of math. Does the math work approximately?
Yep.
The math that I'm really struggling with is on slide 14. So we can go to slide 14. So what I'm trying to figure out here is we expect increased rates from PG&E. Am I understanding that right?
In calendar year 27, we expect a modest bump in rates, correct, of about 5.6% in total generation rates. That's inclusive of PCI and sort of AVA's headroom.
So then the headache may come between calendar year and fiscal year. But just my thinking is focused on, we've got rates going up, we've got load going up, and yet we have revenue going down on electricity sales.
Yeah.
So just intuitively, that doesn't feel right.
That is the fiscal year aspect. So if you actually go to the prior slide 13, Adrian, the way to think about that is for fiscal year 26, you have to think about 25, calendar year 25, which is significantly higher rates in 26. So you're averaging 25 and 26, and then you're averaging 26 and 27 in the bottom left bar chart.
Yep.
And so that's
why I trust you.
That's why it's reducing.
I'm looking to verify. So if we could, when we present it in the end, actually break that out so that you can trace that even though prices are going up in the calendar year, that on net prices come down. Or whatever it is that explains why revenue is down. Because when I think of load going up and prices going up, I think, well, revenue should go up. So if you can just like dig down one layer.
Yeah, well,
Not so many slides, but just that.
If I could
one
just point you to the bottom right, which is fiscal year, that I think that is what traces it, right? So that's your fiscal year rate, which blends 25 and the 26 bar blends 25 and 26, and the 27 bar blends 26 and 27. So that's where you see the actual rates come down on average for the fiscal year. Is that sufficient for your tracing?
So which one is the rate?
The totality of the blue bar and the pink bar is your overall generation costs.
So you're saying rates are coming down in fiscal year 27.
Correct.
And how much is that? What's the total there?
It is 5.6%, which is in the bullet highlighted. So it goes down from 13.3 cents to 12 cents. What is I'm eyeballing that, so maybe a little off there, but yeah.
Yeah. So again, so the point is
Some more easily digestible visuals for us to follow the math, which is noted. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Director Roche.
Thank you. Yeah, I did already get to see this in the XCOM, but I wanted to just ask again about the local development funding. I know we agreed that we weren't going to fund it this year, and I know why, because we're looking at more of a neutral position at the end of this year. But if actuals come back, I mean, I just want to make sure we're constantly revisiting, because I understand there's plenty of funding in that fund for the projects that are there. I just want to make sure we're keeping up with, keeping that in the pipeline. So when, our revenue situation looks different, that we make sure we're constantly, keeping ahead of that, so that when these great projects come up, we're not worried about finding it from somewhere else. So thanks for, talking about that, especially because, we also, when we had that December, and I think to your point about maybe we should look at this at a different time, because when we had that December kind of dire look at what the future was going to look like, we decided not to do the local development funding. We didn't, do the Care Fair on bill credits. And so, I just want to make sure we're looking at it, maybe, a couple of these things, maybe even in a sort of shorter term basis, so that we're able to make a decision if we want to, go back and fund some of these things. So
yeah,
just wanted to highlight that.
I think there's every opportunity to revisit this in the mid-year this year again, as we
Great.
see how things actualize. And I know the importance of local development funding, so certainly we'll always raise that and consider what we may want to contribute there. I will also just highlight our value proposition is down to 0.5% discount. So that's an important area. We made a lot of adjustments.
Yeah.
And that's why we're able to see a bit of a surplus this year, and we're neutral next year, but our savings are pretty small as it relates to Bright Choice. So that's just something I would highlight for as we continue the discussion with the board. How do we weigh these different priorities?
Sure.
I know that's a challenge, of course.
All right, thanks. Just want to highlight. Appreciate it.
Okay, Director Tregu.
Yeah, I think I will save most of my questions for later, but the one that the slide that caught my eye, slide 21, with a vacancy rate of 29%. And I was curious, I guess 29% of what? Is it the full complement?
That math is simply, we have 7 budgeted roles. We have 5 hired. So 2 is vacant out of 7. That's where you get the 29%.
Okay.
2 roles out of 7. Yeah.
Thank
and we
you.
do not intend to fill that.
Okay, I think now is the time to turn to public comment on this agenda item.
Great, thank you.
Feng Shui Zheng.
Great, thank you. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening, board members and AVA Community Energy team. My name is Feng Shui Zheng. I'm the campaign organizer with Local Clean Energy Alliance. Over the past several years, AVA Community Energy has built meaningful momentum in community partnership. Through the Local Development Fund, AVA has supported programs ranging from community workshops, workforce development, to community empowerment, technical assistance, and home upgrade incentives. These initiatives have deepened trust, and demonstrated that AVA is willing to invest in the community it serves and uplift those families who rely on its services. I'd like to bring it to your attention that this momentum matters. Community energy resilience does not exist on its own. It relies on a healthy, interconnected ecosystem of community organizations, service providers, and neighborhood-based groups. Their work supports the well-being of local residents, which in turn supports AVA's long-term success. Right now, local residents are facing rising energy burdens, intensifying climate risks, and growing household financial pressures. So at this moment, we ask that the board member stand with the communities and to continue allocating meaningful funding to the local development fund. Also, to invest in community organization capacity building through collaboration with local community foundations. These investments ensures that the frontline communities are not left behind. AVA has already started this important step on this momentum, and we ask that you keep this momentum, keep going. Thank you for your time and your continued leadership.
Great, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Jessica Guadalupe Tovar, Local Clean Energy Alliance. I just want to uplift that last December, it was voted by the board to take $10 million out of the Local Development Business Plan Fund to meet its deficit. And now we're seeing a zero line item towards local development. That is a compounding insult to injury when your own joint powers authority talks about investment in local community to create community benefits. And so I want to uplift that. I also want to uplift that there is a glaring need for capacity building from community-based organizations within your own territory, that several other community choice programs are actually providing for their communities. And to see that this one isn't and is taking money from that fund and not even trying to put it back is something that I really think you all need to reconsider. Thank you. Clean power to the people.
Okay, thank you. Next comment.
Thank you. Bradley Cleveland, recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, Bradley Cleveland. I spoke earlier, Oakland resident and consultant with IBEW Local 595. I wanted to second board member Roach's concerns about the local development fund. It's really easy to understand why the staff proposes no new funds for this year. This is a planning year and there are no new projects moving forward that need funding, and there's sufficient funding in the local development fund to support the ongoing projects. And while it's prudent not to include local development funding in the budget, it's also prudent to replenish that fund if there is a surplus. Otherwise, funding for new and continuing projects will be constrained in future years. And as comment earlier, the board reallocated some of the local development funds to address the current year's deficit. And we're just asking that the board use some of any surplus to backfill the local development fund. And local development investments are critical. And it's one of the reasons why we're here. It really ensures community resilience, ensures investments in our communities through jobs and workforce development, and it supports the local economy and local businesses. Thank you. I've done some budget work in the county, and that was really simple compared to what you're facing, but I really appreciate you considering this. Please allocate those. If there is a surplus, please earmark that money for local development. Thank you.
Thank you. Jed Holtzman, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair and members. My name's Jed Holtzman with Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, a couple buildings down from you. Thank you for your service. I worked from 2013 to 16 for Bay Area CCAs to be able to launch and very much appreciate the work of the agency. I want to support your funding the local development business plan, which is currently zeroed out. There is a need for much more funding for the community than is represented on the expenditure slide. The presentation showed that the agency is continuing to sit on most of the funding that you do have. I believe that you could readily deploy most of the current balance and add more and deploy that as well based on the level of the need. I want to highlight one problem we have in the Bay Area and an example of how AVA could help solve it by adding funding to the LDBP. Air District data indicates that furnaces and water heaters in our residential and commercial buildings release more harmful nitrogen oxide pollution into the region's air than all its passenger vehicles or all of the refineries combined. The Air District estimates this pollution causes 15,000 asthma attacks and 85 premature deaths every year, amounting to $890 million in health impacts every year in the region. The good news is the region is taking steps to reduce and eventually eliminate this pollution by gradually phasing out polluting water heaters and furnaces, and AVA can play an important part to make this transition more equitable. Your partner CCAs are helping their residents reduce pollution and save money on their energy bills by supporting this transition through an array of programs ranging from rebates to bill credits. Through putting more funding into the local development business plan, AVA can pursue public-facing programs like these and others that will increase the electrons you are able to sell, improve public health in AVA territory, and also save your customers money. If you don't want to add more money until you deploy what you have, then we encourage you to deploy that money instead of sitting on it. Currently, you have 15.9 million earmarked to building electrification and are proposing to spend 1 million of that.
Thank you. Sam Fishman, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hello, board members. Sam Fishman here from Spur. Thank you for your time. I also am here to advocate for additional funds for the local development business plan. These funds are not only critical for our community's health, as Jed just mentioned, and many of the other priorities and benefits that come with clean appliances, clean energy, and community resilience, but it's also critical for aligning with regional air district rules and preparing communities to equitably decarbonize at a really critical moment. As Jed noted, there is a really, I'm going to be blunt here, a paltry amount of money coming out of this fund for electrification and other critical priorities at a really transformative time in the region where other CCAs, your kind of compatriots in the region, have been developing programs and investing in programs to electrify buildings, to provide communities with the energy resilience they need, and to align with local regulations. They've been investing in these programs for years and are allocating not just $1 million, but closer to 10 or more $1 million per year in some cases. Now, I know that all CCAs have different constraints and different challenges, but it's really time for AVA to step up to the plate, align their investments with the community needs in the region, and kind of do a little bit of a reality check here. The fact that it's proposed to add nothing to this fund this year at this critical turning point is disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you. Reclaim Our Power, recognized for 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Colin Andrew Logan. I am the organizer, a cultural and community organizer with Reclaim Our Power Utility Justice Campaign. And I have been a supporter of community choice energy more broadly since 2009, was part of the community-based campaign to establish East Bay Community Energy and have support of alternatives to PG&E this entire time. And I appreciate all of your work as a staff. I appreciate your work as a board. And I just want to chime in, really echoing the comments of everyone that's spoken before me, that the local development business fund, beating heart of AVA Community Energy. Without it, it really, it makes AVA essentially a smaller PG&E. We really need community investment in our local communities. And we depend upon this agency to really demonstrate not just a small percentage discount over PG&E, but really a transformative difference to PG&E. That's why we fought so hard to establish this agency in the first place, was the opportunity to build local community wealth, to create good family sustaining local union jobs, and to strengthen local economic development for people of color, low-income people who have been extracted from and who have been harmed by the energy economy. And so please fund the Local Development Business Fund. You can do it. We have no excuse. Thank you for your work. Clean power to the people.
Thank you. Margie Lewis, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Margie Lewis. I'm speaking as a ratepayer and a member of Local Clean Energy Alliance to advocate for AVA to continue funding the Local Development Fund. AVA is proposing $0, no allocation for the fund this year. This fund was set up to support local development, community resilience, and energy affordability, to name just a few areas. We must ensure that AVA upholds the public agency's ongoing commitment to provide green, equitable, accessible, and just investments and local development for the communities in its service area. This local development fund is the heart of AVA's commitment, which is outlined in its Joint Powers Authority and Local Development Business Plan, and it is totally in alignment with the foundational agency roadmap, which was designed to create and maintain annual community benefits for the communities it serves. While we recognize the importance of the financial and market health of AVA Community Energy, Local Clean Energy Alliance urges the Board of Directors to remain firm in advancing community priorities, which are advancing grassroots accessible grant programs for communities, resilient hubs, unionized clean energy jobs, electrification, rebates, etc. We joined AVA to generate these community benefits. The Development Fund is the primary vehicle for AVA's investments in community resilience, local clean energy, workforce development, building electrification incentives, and direct support for vulnerable families. Without new funding, the remaining balance can only support existing commitments for a short time. I support the community demands of the People's Clean Power Alliance, steered by the Local Clean Energy Alliance, to ensure that public money directly supports our most frontline, historically disinvested communities so that we all benefit from a clean energy future. Thank you for your work and your time.
Thank you. Susan Silver, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. My name is Susan Silver. I'm a resident of Berkeley, and I'm the program director of Collective Resilience, which supports the development of resilience hubs and spaces in neighborhoods in the Bay Area. I'm also a member of the People's Clean Power Alliance. As a member of this alliance and also supporter of the Local Clean Energy Alliance, I was very excited to join our local CCA to generate community benefits for grants programs like resilience hubs to electrification routines. I just want to share, like my previous colleagues, I'm very, very frustrated that AVA is proposing no new dollars for the Local Development Fund, which is, as they have mentioned, the primary vehicle in AVA's investments in community resilience, local clean energy, directly supporting and direct support for vulnerable families. So without this new funding, as we shared, there can be no funding for new programs. I was super excited to have attended a grants ideation workshop in January, which was spearheaded by former staff member Heidi Ramirez. There were some excellent ideas that came out of this workshop. We recommended supporting grants for K-12 education programs about energy resilience, which is desperately needed, and also funding for a network of resilience hubs, which would totally make sense because AVA Community Energy is supplying battery backup, but $0 for actual program implementation for resilience hubs. So with this in mind, I stand with the People's Clean Power Alliance in urging the board to champion equity, access, and innovation by providing more funding for development. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised this time.
Okay, thank you all. I see one more hand raised. So please approach the podium. Any other comments in the room? We really do need to move along. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Good evening. I will try to be succinct given the time, but I just wanted to express appreciation for the thoughtfulness by staff and local development staff for providing the budget analysis. I just have 3 considerations I'd like to uplift in terms of reviewing the annual budget for fiscal 2026 and 27. First is I would just like to encourage the clerk and AVA staff when there are changes with the ERRA filing and PG&E, if there could be some process in this kind of democratic process and with respect to the Brown Act of representing kind of the changes. I understand that PG&E does not make it easy. They redact information, but if there are ways to kind of notify the public and notify any slide changes to the slides for transparency purposes, would really appreciate that. Second, I would also like to uplift the EJ workforce resolution that Bradley Cleveland shared. I think there are a lot of opportunities for AVA to be a wealth generator for communities with targeted local union apprenticeships, high road training partnerships, having localized investments. I think that would help diversify your portfolio instead of always being on the defensive due to state regulatory hardships. And I also wanted to mention and uplift, there has been really great research from our local Clean Energy Alliance partners from Michigan. They are actually part of Energy Equity Project. They are graduate research interns, and they were mentioning, AVA could do social impact bonds. They could figure out ways to have revenue generation by having internal contracting. I know Lunar, for example, is a distributed energy resource management service, and if that could be not just third party but internal, that could help be a revenue generator. So just want to uplift their work too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Thank you, everyone, for all of your comments this evening. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board. As was mentioned, this will be coming back to the FAP. This will also be coming back to XCOM before it comes back to this body. So there will be more time to ask questions and dig into the very meaty presentation. I also want to thank staff, both our CEO, Howard, Rusty, and Jason, and everyone. I'm sure there were others that worked on this, pulled the all-nighter, pulled the all-weekender to make these changes and get us the most up-to-date and accurate information tonight to discuss. So I really appreciate that. So again, I'm hoping to get to the one remaining informational item. So if there are any other comments that need to be shared at this time, please go ahead, Director Tregu.
Yeah. Thank you so much. On the just responding to the comments that were made by members of the public, I don't think you ever realize how challenging it is to have to make really deep and devastating cuts following years of expansion until you deal with that with a city budget, as I am doing right now. And so that kind of colors my thinking around, I understand that it's potentially doing steady state right now is a prudent move. But with that said, when this comes back, I would appreciate seeing a sensitivity analysis. What might it look like? Do it maybe not to put back $10 million, but to put $5 million, just, how that might impact projections. And also under the almost $30 million of commitments under the local development budget, it would be helpful for me when this comes back to see out-year projections when, how that is being anticipated to be spent down and in which years. Thank you.
Okay, Director Roche.
Quickly, I know we need to move on. I just wanted to sort of, just get confirmation. So right now, the local development fund balance has 83 million in the fund balance. Is that right? So we've allocated a lot of money over the years. And right now we have commitments to spend commitments to 29 million, right? But so I just, just wanted to sort of make that clear from my perspective. That was why I was comfortable deferring these transfers in so that we don't get too far behind that, getting close, so I am committed, like everyone has talked about, to making sure we get back to that when we have a surplus. But just wanted to make sure everyone understood that there's an $83 million fund sitting there that we've made a real commitment. I think we all want to do that work, that the money's sitting there, and then we have, I know that I have a commitment, I think everybody does, to get back to funding that so we don't fall behind on those projects. Thank you.
Great. And the only thing I might just add is, funding is one piece of the puzzle. Certainly it's a big piece, but there's also organizational bandwidth. So partially it's, kind of what's realistic and what is our time frame for spending down those funds. That would be some good data to have as well in terms of these discussions. Okay, so I'm looking at my colleagues online. Nope. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to close out this item. Again, thank you so much for the members of the public for your written comments and your comments this evening. So we're closing out agenda item number 9, and we're moving on to agenda item number 10, which is City of San Leandro's request for default service plan change. This is an informational item, and I think there's only 4 slides. So Alex DeGiorgio is going to give us a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public. Alex DeGiorgio, Public Engagement Manager for AVA. And yes, only 4 slides, so I'll do my best to get through it as quickly as possible. We're here, it's an informational item on the recent request from the City of San Leandro to change its default service option. Next slide, please. Thank you, Adrian. Quick background. Last month, the San Leandro City Council passed a resolution to change its citywide default service option, to request that change from AVA's board. This is in line with the default rate product change policy. Just for some quick history here, this is not the first time the city has made such a request. The first time it requested to change its citywide default was from Bright Choice to Renewable 100. That request was in the fall of 2021. It was implemented in March of the following year for residential customers, and then in the fall of 2022 for commercial and industrial customers. And to note that there were exemptions to that default service change request, and those are for income qualified customers, such as those on Care and Farah, Medical Baseline, those who previously opted out. In the case of those who wanted to remain on Bright Choice, they had the option to do so. Next slide, please. In terms of the numbers here, San Leandro has a little more than 20,000 residential accounts and about 3,500 non-residential accounts. Represents approximately 3% of AVA's total load. And if you include the municipal accounts, that's another 6 gigawatt hours. And those are anticipated to remain on Renewable 100. They're not part of this citywide default service option change from Renewable 100 to Bright Choice. Of course, those who wish to remain on Renewable 100, if the board approves this, would have the opportunity to do so. Next slide, please. A quick summary of the policy. It was updated in 2024. And so requests that are made by our JPA member jurisdictions, there is a schedule in the policy that requires board approval by May 31st in order to be implemented by March of the following year. However, there is a provision there that if this timeline isn't met, that an adjusted timeline can be implemented per the agreement of the CEO with the requesting JPA member, San Leandro in this case. When we receive requests of this kind, our staff does its diligence in terms of conducting analyses to evaluate how implementing this type of request would affect AVA's service area-wide customer base, as well as our internal operations. And again, just to reiterate the point that those customers who do wish to remain on Renewable 100, should this be approved, will have the opportunity to do so. Next slide, please. So right now, our staff is conducting that diligence when it comes to assessing the financial impacts of what approving this type of citywide default rate change would be. And the results and the options therefrom will be presented to the board at a future meeting, including those that could mitigate any potential negative impacts. And with that, I think that's the end of the slides, and be happy to take questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Do we have any director questions on this topic? Looking online, seeing none, looking around the room, seeing none. Okay, I have one. So in terms of the convergence of Bright Choice and Renewable 100 in the future, right? Because aren't we getting closer as the Bright Choice mix gets cleaner? So this seems to be an issue that is going to have less and less of a fiscal impact. The decision as between the two will have less and less of a fiscal impact to the agency over time. Am I thinking about this correctly?
Yes, there are some nuances there, though. The board approved goal is by 2030 to have Bright Choice be a carbon free, and there is some difference between technically renewable energy and carbon free energy.
Yeah.
So the Renewable 100 would be strictly renewable portfolio standard per California law, whereas Bright Choice, in order to be carbon free, could include, for example, large hydroelectric resources.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Okay. Any other questions? Did I say no? Okay. All right. Great. Let's go to public comment.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment. And,
Sorry.
Oh, we do have a hand? Yes, okay.
IVW, you recognize for 2 minutes.
Hello. I just have a question. For the $83 million fund, does that for local community development? I'm not completely familiar with budgeting and stuff, but does that is it just what's left after expenses for local communities, or is it just
So Avi, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but that was our last agenda item. We've actually moved on, and the agenda item we're discussing right now is about San Leandro changing their default energy to the Bright Choice plan. So I would ask you to, do you have a comment on that?
No. All
Okay.
right. I'll
All
mute.
right.
Sorry.
Okay, hopefully someone can answer the question for you and make that more clear. So thank you for your comment. Okay, any other public comments on this agenda item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the board. Is there anything else that anyone would like any comments to make? Okay, we're going to go ahead and this was an informational item. The information has been brilliantly presented and quickly presented by Alex. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to go ahead and close out agenda item number 10. And we are moving on to board member and staff announcements, including any requests to place items on future board agendas. I'm looking around, I'm looking online. Okay, I don't see, oh, yes, the vice chair.
So it's not it's not so much a response to the public commenters, but I have been myself thinking about this notion of heat pumps and the water heaters, because I do sit on the Air District board. And one of the challenges that we're seeing at the Air District is that the cost, particularly for low-income households, can be a material impact on their decision. So I would encourage us to consider through some future process how we might align with the Air District goals of cleaning the air and our goals of electrification by maybe electrifying higher impact items. I know some things that we do because they're fun or they're pet projects, but we can clean the air materially by focusing how we spend those dollars and achieve our goal of electrification. So I'll just put it out there for right now, and we can revisit it in due course. Thank you, Chair. Great, thank you. That would be interesting to explore further, so I appreciate that. Okay, did you have Director Traeger?
Yeah, just very briefly on that. as someone who is not on the Air District Board, but have been speaking out in support of new rules 9496. I think a general presentation whenever possible would be great as to should the new rules come in place, just general AVA alignment with that program. What can we do to support it as an agency?
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, the next AVA Board of Directors meeting will be held here on Wednesday, June 17th of 2026 at 6 p.m. The time is now 8:56 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, fine.